What if Bella became Damon's friend? Part 4. BPOV. After the tears subdued, we all relaxed and were engaged in a comfortable, easy conversation of everything and nothing that we could think of. I know I should be angry or at least mad, but all I could feel was warmth. I've wasted so much energy in crying and being angry at the world, my fate, Edward, Damon and I was too tired. The rest wanted to come over but we didn't want to overwhelm you, Esme explained, her voice as gentle as her air. Her grace in her pose as she held me to her side. My head remained on her shoulder. My fingers had now become entwined with Edward's, who sat back on the sofa next to me. Alice and Emmett were occupying the opposite seat. I wonder how long they could all stay without their other halves. They must be missing them terribly. Edward lifted our joined hands and gave a brief kiss on the knuckles before adding, "They wanted to tell you how much they miss you." He looked down at me, his eyes brighter and life flickered in them, a great contrast from how we met in the masquerade. "I miss them too." My words were quiet, hoarse even from the wailing I'd been doing. It felt stupid now when I look back to it. I never really realized just how much I'd missed them, and right now I wasn't sure if this complicated thing further or made my next move easier. "So you're not really clumsy?" Emmett broke the silence, and I chuckled as I sat up straighter, removing my head from Esme's shoulder but still remained close to her. Shaking my head, I answered nervously, "No. That was a charade. Bella is basically a complete alter ego to me." They all became pensive as they considered my words. "Although, my love for this family was never fake," I admitted, and they each gave me a small smile. Allowing them to contemplate my words, we sat in silence which was momentarily broken. "Why didn't you just tell us the truth? Why go through all that trouble of making up a new identity?" The betrayal in Alice's expression pained me and I avoided her gaze as I nervously played with the ends of my hair. "Life before," I sighed as I ran through my thoughts, trying to organize my answer. It was hard. I wasn't in a great place and I wanted a fresh start. Shrugging my shoulders as I answered truthfully. "I wanted to be I don't know normal human." I guess I played with my fingers anxiously as I waited for them to leave too. "But as I got to know all of you, I don't know, I felt like I found somewhere where I could actually reveal myself, and I found that my true self would sometimes slips out. And I did intend on telling you all, but I trailed off, my eyes trained on the carpet." "We left," Emmett exhaled. "Well, yeah," nodding to confirm. "It doesn't matter. All that matters now is that we read together." Esme squeezed my hand with one and then used the other to brush away locks from my face. I nodded in agreement with a tight-lipped smile, but all I could think of as a mental reply was, "For how long?" "At least you still blush," Emmett joked, and we all laughed at his silliness. I'd missed him. He shared the same qualities as Alcander, not just the physical appearance, but both shared that sense of humor, finding laughter even in our darkest moments. Always trying to make us laugh but also being a fierce protector when necessary. That, I still do. Giving another light-hearted laugh. I was about to ask Alice about Jasper to rid him of some guilt, but my phone vibrated in my pocket. "Excuse me," holding up one finger and breaking my hold from Edward's hand. He gave a small pout to which I stuck out my tongue and ruffled his hair, which made him give me a mock glare, and I laughed at his happiness before walking to the kitchen for privacy. Looking down at the caller ID, I wasn't more surprised than nervous when seeing the name Salvatore Sweetness flash on my screen. "Hey," I sighed over the phone. He chuckled over the phone before answering, "Hey beauty." Salvatore Sweetness. I recalled the caller ID, which made him laugh, probably remembering our rock ages. "What's up?" I felt happier, lighter even, and I wanted to go with it. "Didn't I deserve just one happy day?" His next words took me by surprise. "Elena's gone missing." His voice was low, that I could almost sense his tension over the phone. He was uneasy, probably thought I'd snap at him or attack him, and even though part of me wanted to rejoice but also beat him up for calling me first thing in the morning to discuss the two-timing doppelganger, I really didn't want to be that person by succumbing to the monster within. I needed peace and it was my duty to protect her. I thought over what to do. So Elena was missing, probably some vampire trying to suck up to the originals or be rewarded with safety. I ran through a list of vampire names but couldn't think of those in debt for an original that wasn't Catherine, and she was in the tomb. Whoever had her wouldn't have direct contact with Klaus or Elijah. Just as I was about to answer, Alice came through the kitchen doorway with a worried expression. "Belle." It surprised me that she was actually calling me by my real name, and I was grateful because it reminded me that our relationship was now starting on truth. "What's wrong?" she questioned, catching on to the stress playing in my expression. When I parted my lips to answer, Damon's voice broke through. "Isabel." Groaning at this new issue, I released the air I'd been holding. "Be there in 10. I quickly answered and shut off the call, wanting to face him instead on the phone. Elena's safety was in question, and who's to say that whoever had her 1T end up killing her? Pacing the floor, I continued to mull over the different possibilities, but nothing was coming up. Someone with contact with Elijah, maybe even Catherine's friends. No, I shook my head at that option. "Isabel." This time it was Edward, and when looking at the doorway, I found them all staring at me with worried expressions. Now I felt guilty for making them worry, so I froze in my movements and slumped my shoulders as I turned to them. "Everything okay?" Edward asked, rushing over to me and taking my face in his hands so I could look at him. This was ridiculous. Shaking my head out of his palms, I pulled away. "I am fine." I was about to pass it off, but remembered I owed them the truth. A friend of mine mentally scoffing at that thought before continuing my justification for taking responsibility of Elena. "Well, this human I know is in a lot of trouble." Esme seemed concerned. "Trouble?" she gasped. Even for someone she doesn't know, she cares. It was practically a second nature to her. A lot of vampires my kind are going after her. With each revelation I brought, it was accompanied with more concern being built upon them. "Why?" Emmett asked. Even he was showing signs of apprehension. "She's a doppelganger, and her blood is somewhat special, as it helps break a spell of some sort." He nodded in acceptance of the answer, but the puzzled look still highlighted his expression. "Now my foolproof theory is that some vampires want her so they can hand her over to the originals, just so they can gain some safety or respect of some sort." The theory was probably true, but I found it ludicrous. From what Elijah told me, gaining trust from Klaus was near to impossible, and once you've angered him, there's no escaping his wrath. This thought made smile, as it all linked to Catherine's current situation, stuck in a tomb awaiting her death. Originals. Edward raised another unanswered mystery. "They are the first vampires of our kind ever created." I purposefully didn't want to expand on that topic, as it would bring a whole series of questions. "How do you even fit into this?" Alice finally perked up, but I could sense the distaste and annoyance her tone withheld. Her growing fear for me was manifesting, and I wish I could reassure her, but she couldn't have a vision of me, as I was mentally and unconsciously blocking her. The only reason they'd found me was because Alice had been able to finally see me when I had that mental breakdown, which had then broken down my mental armor momentarily, as we discussed previously. Witches are like guardians, and it is not only my duty as a witch but also as a person with a moral to offer any help that I can. I could still see the shock when I mentioned facts about witches. It was taking them some time to adjust to it, so I withheld the urge to show them what I could do. Scaring them away was the last thing I wanted to do. "I don't like this," Edward murmured, his fingers grazing down my jawline and to my exposed shoulder, and I shivered under his cold touch, which made him crack a small smile, but I already caught on to the smugness in the lift of his lips. I too lifted my palm to cup his cheek, which he instinctively leaned into. "You don't have to," stroking his cheek in comfort in my feeble attempt to assure him. "Only reason you worried is 'cause you haven't seen what I can do." He shook his head at me, and I let my hand drop. "There is still a chance, a possibility you could get hurt," he stated in a stern tone. "Only if werewolves are involved, which they probably aren't." Even the thought brought a shiver down my spine, which didn't go unnoticed by Edward, who looked at me curiously but let it go. "That was a story for another time." Emmett picked up on my comment, which evidently brought on more questions. "Werewolves?" Chancing a glance at them, I could see the worry had become more prominent, etched in each of their features and the forming creases on their forehead. "A werewolf bite can kill our kind. Don't think I didn't miss your probably," Edward pointed out. With an exasperated, almost annoyed sigh, I tried my assurance. "There is no risk. I am still coming with you," he stated firmly, and my shoulders slumped. Could I handle Damon and Edward even in the same room with no witnesses? Yesterday had been so close to a battle. What about today? The massacre played in my head, and I shook it away as I argued. "No, Edward, you don't need to get involved. The last thing we need is to get cold ones involved with our mess." That was only part of why he should stay away today, but I didn't want to mention what I was thinking. Maybe he wanted to come so he could spy on me and Damon. Would that actually be a good idea, because it would stop me from being a Catherine and playing the both of them, but then again it would just spiral me into further confusion like now. The guilt was overbearing now, so if I was stuck in the same room as both of them it would lead to another emotional breakdown. Plus I'd noticed how uncivilized both are to each other and how both used the same fact that they would keep fighting was that meant in the literal sense too. Being the stubborn person he was, Edward counteracted, I can just stay here while you re-out God knows where, and there's a chance that I could lose you. His words were rushed and I could feel my resolve breaking. Having both of them in the same room would keep in check and prevent any surprise makeouts. Being in the presence of both of them would alert my morals and conscience. You couldn't lose me if you tried. I tried, but even I knew it sounded pathetic. He looked at me with a fierce tenacity. Still, no way was he giving this up. I peeked over his shoulder at the overlooking observers who got the message and trailed out of the kitchen, but only into the living room. I knew they could still hear, but not having their eyes trained on us made it slightly less tense. Once they were out of sight, I relaxed a little before arguing some more. Edward the First wasting time. I need to get to Damon. Saying his name to Edward felt like more betrayal, and I bit my stupid uncontrolled tongue. Damon. The guy from yesterday. His furrowed eyebrows brought creases to his forehead, and I noted how he looked away from me but instead at the floor. Fuck. This was not good. More questions, which meant more revelations. Fuckity fuck my life. Trying to keep my calm, I breathed through my nose as I answered in attempts to keep the waver away from my voice. Yes, Damon. He's another one of my kind that sounded okay, kinda casual. Not such a big deal. A boyfriend. Edward caught on and I closed my eyes as the inevitable conversation landed. No avoiding it now. I gnawed at my lip as I considered whether to lie, but rested on the truth. Taking the high road was difficult, but I owed it to him and the Cullens, an ex-lover. My reply was hesitant, but it was long way before your time. I don't think you were even born when we met, I responded quickly, hopefully erasing the solemn look on his face, but he didn't meet my eyes. Are you mad? I bit my lip, the guilt weighing in now. This was another thing that I had lied about being a virgin. Well, we didn't exactly talk about it, but it was probably assumed. No, he sighed in conclusion, and I finally looked up at him in surprise with a gaping mouth, finding that he had been waiting to lock gazes again. We all have pasts. Let's just focus on the present and hopefully the future, he answered in slightly forced manner, but the morose slightly less palpable, but nonetheless it was still there. I am sorry, hoping he could see how remorseful I truly felt. Fuck, this day was getting worse and it seemed fate was against me having a relaxed day. After all this I should go to some secluded area away from everything and everywhere, maybe Antarctica, fry some fish and party with the penguins. I wonder if vampires can go crazy. With my case, I'd guess probably. Edward's cool fingers lifted my chin to meet his intense gaze. It was the past, right? He asked. Yes, I breathed, yet I was still nervous. He left my chin and opted for my cheek again. You still love him though, don't you? He always caught on. The answer couldn't be formed or even leave my lips with fear of breaking him as much as I already had. Edward the First, don't want to hurt you right now, was the best reply that I could give. Unshed tears burnt my eyes and I tried to blink them away. Fortunately he didn't ask anything else including Damon, but instead he took a different route. Do you still love me? His nervousness was adorable, almost laughable, but my distressed condition wouldn't permit me to revel in the amusement. Biting my lip once more, I nodded and I didn't notice the stray tears until he reached up to swipe them away. Yeah, I blinked back the rest of the threatening tears. And I still love you. His fervent determination was surprising and I wanted to call him out on it, but he beat me to the punch. I don't want to sound all teenage drama. He waved his hands comically and I let myself give a light chuckle. The small sound appeared to have worked wonders as my heavy heart shed a layer of the guilt. At least he knew some of my secrets. We were slowly getting there. But he seemed unsure whether to continue and the nervousness was back. Go on, I urged timidly, playing with the hem of his shirt. He still hesitated and I worried what he was going to ask. Whatever it was an issue that he couldn't avoid and had probably been gnawing at his thoughts. Finally he sighed and began to explain. I was just was I some kind of rebound to you? No. God no, there was the guilt again. I am sure a human would have committed suicide with the amount of culpability I was carrying right now. I quickly took Edward's face in my hands and tiptoed to meet his eyes, wanting him to see my honesty. No, never. I wasn't even planning on dating someone. I mean, sure, I wanted to move on, I wanted to forget Damon and how he hurt em. He interrupted my burst of apologies. He hurt you. I could have lied, but I'd already started. Edward already knew, but for some reason he wanted to hear me say it. Yes, I took his balled up fists and stroked them with my thumb, trying to relax the tense muscles, but at the same time, I fought away the memories of that night. You were never a rebound, Edward. You just, how could I explain to him without hurting him? Happened, I guess, was the best I could think of in explaining how we crossed. And I fell for you. I fell in love with your kindness, your compassion, your selflessness, your loyalty, your humanity. Again my rambling was interrupted. Humanity. He seemed curious, but I was just glad that the sadness had fleeted, and he almost seemed exuberant. My words had obviously done wonders for his ego. Yes, I nodded to emphasize the truth in my listing. You may not see it because of your stubbornness. We both smirked at that. It was a quality we both shared. But you still hold on to your humanity, and that is something I admire. He broke into a full-on grin which caused another chuckle to leave my lips. Edward took me by surprise by pulling me into a hug again. I lay my head onto his chest, my fingers playing with his buttons. Isabel, he breathed into my hair and then inhaled before continuing. You are everything to me and more. I don't want to lose you again. I am here for you in any way you want me. Just know that it's you that holds my heart, he proclaimed. Words I had learnt the hard way multiple times, that words were just words, but it was different with Edward. He showed me, proved to me that they were more than words. The fact that he was still here after learning everything and knowing I'd lied countless times wasn't something I could simply overlook. But all through his words, Damon kept flashing in my mind, and the betrayal returned. Now let me tell you, betrayal and guilt did not mingle well, so I pulled back from Edward. He didn't. He seemed phased, almost as if he was expecting it. Edward wanting to explain to him how I needed time, but he nodded in understanding. I know I am hurting you, and even though that hurts me, I have to let you know. I need you to hear me tell you the truth about what I feel. He justified himself. Damn, why did he always know the right thing to say, right thing to do? And why did I always do the wrong things or say the wrong things? He should just find someone else, someone worthy of his sweet nothings. Someone who could deserve his benevolence and his affection, but me, being the stubborn, selfish person I was, I didn't want to cast him away even if I could. Compulsion doesn't work on cold ones. I am sorry for lying to you. I am sorry that I am such a fuck up. I am sorry that I can choose. I am so sorry. The tears were falling again, and I allowed him to bring me into his arms once again. He held em, trailing his fingers down my back while I breathed in, trying to rein in my traitor tears. This was supposed to be a smooth sailing, relaxed day, but so far it was winding down into a loophole. Pushing away from Edward, I turned to wipe away the tears, and taking in a final deep breath, I turned to him again. I stopped when catching the lift of his eyebrow. We need to go, I corrected, knowing I would have lost the battle anyway. He probably would have come anyway if I said no. He nodded but still held his cautious expression as he stared at me warily, maybe waiting for another meltdown. Rolling my eyes at him, I took his hand and dragged him towards the living room where his siblings and mother had obviously heard everything. When we pushed through the door, they pretended to be nonchalant, apparently talking about the different species of flowers in Mrs. Flower's collection. I know you were listening, and I shook my head at them in mock disapproval, but the smile ruined my charade. Emmett was first to drop the whole act as he shot up from his seat. Yeah, but Belle, we can't just let you attack a bunch of vampires by yourself. He looked ready for battle, always the hothead. Pacing the room, I stood in front of him with my arms crossed. It doesn't always have to come down to a fight. You expect there to be one though, right? He hitched his brow at me, and I shook my head, rolling my eyes before running a hand down my face. I'd gone through this whole thing with Edward, but at least Emmett was less stubborn than Edward. A few threats can throw them off track, trying to calm the tension in the room, but to no avail. Only Edward was content, but the only reason was because I'd agreed to let him come. I couldn't take away Alice, Emmett and Esme from their other halves. I was sure it was already difficult right now, and who knows how long it'd take for me to find Elena's location. Threats. Belle, we can't lose you again. What if you get hurt? Emmett stuck to his argument, his anger fading and replaced with his desolation as he pondered over the possibility of losing me. It touched me how I'd gotten so lucky to find people that cared for me as if I was one of them, to easily accept me in their family. I racked my brain for something to calm them. I could see the determination in their eyes of assisting me when it really wasn't necessary. I just agreed to let Edward come with me. I wouldn't have given in so easily if I thought it was some kind of undefeatable war. My explanation seemed to waver their resolve. I can guarantee, I will live to see another century, probably more. I knew I had them now. Just trust me now, I added, the pleading look which broke Emmett. Then Esme and Alice hesitantly relented. Fine, but if anything happens, he had given in to the defeat, and I was grateful because I didn't have another fight in me. Sighing, I fought the impulse to roll my eyes again. You're on speed dial, I promised, then crossed my heart with a small victorious smug smirk which he mirrored. Well, if you're sure. Esme was still wary, but she didn't voice it even though it was evident in her conflicted eyes. Yes, I'll be fine, I assured her, and she tried to force a smile, but she didn't seem to be strong enough as it fell when she brought me in for another hug. Her arms tightened around mine as if it was the last time she'd be seeing me. For some reason I tightened my hold too. The uncertainty of our next meeting hung in the atmosphere, but we left it unsaid. When we broke apart, Esme walked to Edward and gave him a hug too, although it was briefer. She then took his hand and looked him in the eyes. Look after her, son, she instructed. More like I should look after him, trying to lighten the mood. It worked to an extent, but only on Edward, who smirked while the rest found no humor in the situation. I hated making them feel like this, but they needed to know there really was no danger. See you in a bit, sis, Emmett vowed and swung me around in his bear hug. When putting me back down, the grin on his face made me feel the return of my previous happiness. Alice was last, but she didn't exactly hold a troubled expression, but more like an uncertainty mixed with annoyance. Was she pissed at me? It didn't seem like it. I hope not. Anyway, I couldn't handle my sister being mad at me. I opened my mouth to say something else assuring, but she stopped me by gripping me tightly with her icy arms. It's close to impossible to see your future now, and I don't know what will happen next or what you will choose. Her voice was a fleeting hushed whisper in my ear as she tightened her hold. I wanted to question her words when she pulled back, but she simply gave my cheek a quick peck before turning to walk out of the house without a backwards glance. I wasn't sure what to say or ask, so I just stared at the door with a dumbfounded expression. We'll see you later, Belle. Take care of yourself. Emmett began to conclude our talk, but I barely hear him as I replayed Alice's words. Strong arms went around me once again, and I blinked to respond to the freezing yet comforting touch. I love you, Belle, Esme whispered, gave me and Edward a meaningful glance before waving and walking out the door. Emmett took a step to leave too, and I felt my heart stretch out and yearn for them to stay, but he paused, to which I was grateful for. He turned to show me his expression that was torn between a half smile and a melancholy distress. Don't worry about Alice, she's just worried about you. We all are, and we don't want this to feel like a real goodbye, Emmett explained, and I tried to understand that theory. But it wasn't our final goodbye, was it? No, it couldn't be, I somewhat convinced myself. Collecting my jumbled thoughts, as soon as I've sorted everything, I'll call you, or Edward can bring me over, I suggested, hoping this would put their minds at ease. You're welcome anytime. Next time, I'll arm wrestle you, I challenged, wanting to see the grin light up his face before he left. I accept, little sister, he said in a patronizing way and attempted to ruffle my hair, but I swatted him away. It was already messy as it was. The promising words had worked, and he gave me one last hug and gave the same to Edward, before leaving with a glowing smile. Till next time, he added before closing the door, leaving me and Edward alone as we stared at each other, both of going over what had been revealed. We'd definitely moved up to a whole new level. You drive, Edward threw the keys at me, and I looked at him with a questioning brow. I just want to watch, he elaborated, and I rolled my eyes but accepted. It would have been an inconvenience to drive the motorbike, we needed some space. You know you need to stop with the stalker tendencies. The smirk couldn't be held back as I caught onto his narrowed eyes with a mock glare as he stopped in his tracks. Ignoring him, I continued on towards his car, and it wasn't long before his footsteps began to follow after me. Once he was caught up, I looked at how he raised an eyebrow as he looked up into the sky with a thoughtful expression before pointing out, I didn't watch you sleep yesterday. He seemed almost proud for that statement. I rolled my eyes at his answer, but the smile was playing on my lips. Like you didn't notice my windows were boarded up. Instead of arguing with a quick comeback, he moved to my side and opened the door for me before I could. Thanks. He nodded in response before adding a breathless, "You're welcome." I then realized just how close we were and the fact that our noses were almost grazing, so I quickly slipped into car, but I did catch onto his side before he too entered the car. Pretending I hadn't heard him, I put the car into gear, loving the humming response it gave as pulling out of the gravel hidden in the forest before arriving at the main road which led to the main town. Edward reached forwards in his seat to turn on his stereo, and Debussy enveloped us as did the memories. I knew he'd done it on purpose with the impish glint dancing in his eyes, but when catching my gaze he shrugged his shoulders, feigning innocence. Tuning back to the road, I tapped the steering wheel before stating nonchalantly, "Isabel likes Debussy," confirming some part of me wasn't a lie. Edward didn't seem too fazed, but simply angled his body so he was staring at me, so it encouraged me to open up further. "She also has a thing for Rod Stewart," I revealed with a slight smirk as I stared at the road but could see him from my peripheral vision. "She does she?" From my peripheral vision, I could see the smirk was playing on his lips too. His playful mood was contagious, so I matched his humorous tone. "MMHMM. Went to the concerts too." I prayed he wouldn't ask for more information about the concerts because most of them involved memories of Damon. Not a safe territory with Edward only inches away. Favorite song? At least that was a safe question. Without thinking, I gave my automatic response, "Do you think I am sexy?" "I do," he answered in a heartbeat, and I felt my face flush, so I bowed my head a little, but my eyes still stayed on the road. Edward leaned over and began to play with the ends of the loose tendrils, humming with the notes that danced around the relaxed atmosphere. His fingers slid down to the back of my neck. His cool touch relaxed me slightly, and I felt myself go rigid for a second before I allowed myself to relax. He then moved his gaze down the nape of my neck, which dazed me momentarily from my driving, making me swerve a little. I turned my head to look up at him with a disapproving stare. His face again, faked innocence. "What happened to giving me time?" I asked, half joking but half serious because he was making everything incredibly twisted as it was. "Didn't he say I'd behave?" He chuckled, and in response, my lips tugged up to a smirk, as he leaned in to inhale my smell before sitting back. His cheerful mood was slightly amusing with the direct contrast to how he was when he was with Bella. But I couldn't help but wonder if he was changing himself to be what he thought the new me wanted. Biting my lip nervously, I finally brought the courage to ask, "Why have you changed?" Trying to keep my eyes trained on the road, happy that it was almost deserted, which lessened chances of crashing. Glancing at him, I found that he was slightly confused, his eyebrows furrowing as he mulled over what I'd said, trying to make sense of my question. Changed? Did he really not know what I meant? Even he should be able to have taken into account the difference in his own attitude. Maybe vampires can actually go insane. "You seem happier, freer and less." I tried to think of a fitting word. Frigid, I decided, was close enough to what I meant. He inclined his head towards me. I met his glance before looking back at the road. Frigid. This time his confusion was gone as he stared at me with an amused expression with my choice of words. "Yes, you didn't hold back when why?" I trailed off, looking back at the road hoping that he'd catch on to what I was referring to. Why was it when I think about it now, it felt like betrayal to Damon even though we weren't even together. "What, kiss you?" He was still smug and I rolled my eyes. "Should I remind you?" He smirked, leaning closer to me. Even though I knew he was joking, I couldn't stop the panic rising, so I was grateful when he only grazed my cheek with his lips before reining his control and moving back with another snug smirk. Knowing the real you, the vampire side, and the fact that I can't hurt you anymore brought out the real me. "Truthfully, Isabel, I always found you irresistible, and it took every ounce of control to not ravage you in public places. I had to stop myself because I thought you were human, and yesterday I was so close to losing it." He clenched his fists slightly before relaxing his tense posture. It was as if he was holding himself back. I found it slightly amusing yet fascinating seeing him like this. The guilt just kept building on. "May not be what you want to hear." I paused to look him dead in the eye to know I was being serious, "but I am really grateful that you stopped." "May not be what you want to hear, but I can't stop having inappropriate thought about you in that corset," he whispered in a voice I've never heard him use it was raw guttural, husky and dripping of a newly revealed want. Was this Edward at all? I turned to him wanting to say something but the smart-ass comments were dry so I just shook my head and found to my surprise that we were rounding the last corner to the boarding house. Nerves began to sink in and I tried with great difficulty to compose my erratic breathing as I pulled into the driveway. Glancing at Edward, I found him staring at the boarding house with curiosity. At least one of us was calm. As soon as the engine was cut off, Edward had flashed to my side and opened the door for me. He held out his hand with a hopeful glint in his eyes. I am hoping Isabel is into the whole gentleman gesture. He gave a wicked grin which I returned as I slipped my palm into his. With Edward it was so easy, so simple. We walked in a peaceful silence towards the front of door but just as I was about to knock, Stefan was already flinging the door open. His gaze landed on Edward with confusion before dropping to our still joined hands. In realization, I dropped Edward's hand and smiled guiltily at Stefan but avoiding Edward's questioning stare. Hi, it came out as a question as he kept sending wary glances at Edward. He's a cold one so he knows about us. Why is he here? We know each other. I am Isabel's old friend. Edward decided to interject for which I was thankful for so I finally looked at him and thanked him with a kind smile. I couldn't deal with Stefan too right now plus he already lost his head over Elena's disappearance. Stefan seemed to accept the lame excuse. Bonnie's already here he informed us and I inclined my head for him to lead on. Glancing at Edward, he waited for me to move before trailing in after me. He began to look around the house antique auction with wonder and amazement yet he seemed slightly uncomfortable to be here. Come on, I tugged on his arm and we followed through to the parlor. Bonnie was sat cross-legged on the floor with books and papers surrounding her all of which I could see were written in Theban. Tearing my hand away from Edward's, I rushed down to the distressed Bonnie and gave her a smile in greeting which she returned with a tired one. I squeezed her arm and nodded, letting her know all would be well. Who's he? She nodded towards Edward who was taking his place on the sofa behind us. He's a vampire so he can hear you. He's an old friend, I answered but it didn't seem to fool Bonnie as she arched one eyebrow so I tried to change the subject. Good, you brought your grimoire, I grinned at her to which she simply rolled her eyes at my tactics but thankfully didn't comment. She seemed more at ease with my presence and that pleased me. She was back on work mode as she read through the book with me but with a frown. Don't think it'll be much help though. Waving my hand casually, I assured her, there's always something. She seemed slightly content with my answers. I picked up the grimoire and settled back onto the living room, deep in thought as I read through the different spells of the Bennetts. They were different to us swans as they were more inclined in using herbs and personal items whereas I was mostly taught to connect with nature in order to draw out the energy needed. Edward had sat down on the sofa I was in and was now looking at the book with a puzzled expression, his eyebrows furrowing as he uselessly tried to make sense of Theban. Sorry, off limits to vampires. It's a witch thing, I teased and he just shook his head at me with an amused expression. I tucked my feet under me and placed the book on my lap then took out my glasses from my pocket and watched Edward's reaction in catching me in glasses. He breathed in deeply as he sank in deep thought and kept silent even when he reached up to move a loose tendril away from my face then broke out into a grin. It's Theban, the language, I clarified for him yet he still seemed unsure. Theban. His head slacked to his left slightly and he looked at me as if I'd grown two heads. Which language? He nodded accepting my answer so I took it as a safe sign to continue reading. I flicked through the pages but froze momentarily when Edward began to graze my neck again. His fingers playing up my skin sending a shiver down my spine but I fought off the shudder and tried to place my full focus on Stefan who was watching our interaction with interest and suspicion. How long has she been gone? I tried to sidetrack him. He was immediately on the ball with the answer. Jeremy says he hasn't seen her from the masquerade. The creases on his forehead returned and his hair grew messier as he ran his fingers through it more. Do you think it's Catherine? Stefan voiced his worry, shaking my head at the possibility as I knew Catherine didn't want to get others involved with something as serious as an original. No, it's not Catherine. She only let others do the small parts of her dirty work. There are many other people who willingly sacrifice Elena. That brought an involuntary smirk on my face which Edward silently questioned but I shook my head to pass it off as nothing. Instead his graze now danced around my exposed shoulder. I was about to ask Stefan where he'd checked when soft footsteps descended the staircase and my heart gave a strong pull with the nearby presence of Damon. It pounded with the certainty of seeing him again and I had to battle with my body to stop my leg from jumping. Trying to hide the surprising excitement, I trained my eyes on the book and continued to listen patiently as he made his way towards us in a painfully slow pace. Finally his steps landed on the ground floor and he slowly sauntered towards us. Yes, I was looking at the page but I was most definitely not taking anything in, so I gave up and looked towards the door to where he eventually emerged in a casual and relaxed manner. Dressed in his classic black t-shirt and dark jeans, but he remained barefoot. His hair was still wet, the water drops made the raven black glisten. His face was serene for a moment as he briefly glanced at Bonnie and Stefan, but it quickly fell as he caught Edward's gaze. Oh no. I looked towards Edward, who thankfully stopped the gentle touches, but then again maybe it was worse with the fact that he placed a protective arm around my shoulders, which had definitely caught Damon's attention as his burning glare was set on it. I grew uncomfortable in my position and squirmed. The small movement seemed to awaken Damon from his gaze, and when our eyes, his anger faded, overtaken with the serene peacefulness. His frosty eyes were now the sea blue, sparkling with happiness, but the glint of mischief remained. Hey, I breathed my greeting, still feeling wary of him and Edward being in the same room. Damon's tense shoulders slumped with the simplicity of my greeting, his jaw unclenched and loosened into an easy yet cocky grin. Hey, mentally berating myself for repeating the same thing. He chuckled and copied me. Hi. He crossed the room towards me and stopped to stand before me, and I stared up at him cautiously, not knowing what he had plotting in his mind. At first I feared he was going after Edward, but his eyes never flickered to anyone else. I was stunned when he stretched out his hand and glanced down at me, his blue eyes still staring straight into mine. It was like no one was around when I slipped my hand into his. The corner of his lips curved up and he pulled me up to bring me into his arms. I tensed for a moment, but when his arms tightened, I melted into him, allowing him to make me forget. He had added his light touch of cologne to his t-shirt and I inhaled, trying to keep this memory. His muscled arms encased me, his chest was pressed up against mine as our breathing seemed to be in sync with the other as our chests rose and fell against each other. His nose brushed up my cheek as did his lips with the slight movement, and I felt the blaze with the minimal gesture, but it set my whole face on fire. Before I could help it, my control was lost as I skimmed my lips on his neck but remained myself in when Edward's face flashed through my mind and I broke away from him. Clearing my throat, nervously I chanced a fleeting glance at the troubled Edward, who seemed to be restraining himself as he gripped the sofa's arms too tightly, but he didn't meet my eyes as he continued to glare at the cocky Damon. Damon had also averted his stare now at Edward, which was cast between a glare and a smug smile. Shit was hard enough being here knowing that kissed both guys on the same night. Fuck, I am a bitch. Man child. Edward growled in annoyance, breaking the uncomfortable silence. His eyes remained on Damon and I realized he must read Damon's mind. Is that what Damon refers to him? I looked over at Damon, whose composure failed, and he cracked a grin which confirmed my thoughts. This would be more difficult knowing that Edward would be listening to every insult Damon was mentally sending, or worse, memories of the both of us together. For Edward to find out that I had had sex with Damon was difficult, but it would be worse if Damon replayed the images. On the other hand, Damon was happy with the revelation as he fit the clues together, so, you mind reader guessing correctly. I would appreciate if you would try and control your thoughts, Edward seethed in response. I hoped Damon would take the warning, but being him, he smirked. The glint in his eyes was enough of a warning, and I watched as Edward snapped up from the seat with a readied clenched fist. Acting on impulse, I moved in front of him and broke the locked stare between them when placing a palm over his chest forcibly. Stefan and Bonnie seemed to have caught on as both of them had stood up too, ready to stop any threatening trouble. Edward finally looked down at me. I silently sent him a pled to calm down, and thankfully he caught on as he sighed in defeat before nodding and stepping back. We've got better things to worry about, so please just stop. I then looked on to Damon, whose good mood had disappeared, but he seemed to have relented in agreement. Taking their silence as an assurance, I dropped my guard and walked to pick up the grimoire which had fallen from my lap with my rapid movements. Instead of sitting next to Edward again, I moved to sit next to Bonnie. Stefan and Bonnie seemed to relax now, trusting there was no danger. She nudged my shoulder and I looked up at her with curiosity. Just an old friend, huh? she teased in a soft whisper, and I rolled my eyes in response and looked back down to the book, trying to concentrate on the spells instead of the two frustrating vampires. Elena Jutz. Think of Elena. She may not be first on the list of people I like, but I had to help her. Helping her meant I was helping Stefan, and he was one of my good friends, so I didn't want to hurt him. And even though I didn't exactly like her, I still worried for her. She must be scared. Why not send her not to calm her down? Tell her we'll be coming soon or something. I am sure she's worried right now. The words poured out and Damon looked up surprisingly from his place at the coffee table. How can you send a message if you don't know where she is? The way Stefan phrased it made it sound like I was stupid. Pivoting to face him, I twinkled my fingers in the air as I replied excitedly, all you need is a little magic. I was satisfied when he at least gave a smile, as did Damon and Edward. Bonnie understood what I was talking about as he reached for a paper and pen to begin writing her comforting note to Elena. She quickly scribbled down and I leaned over to see her note. We are looking for a spell to find you. Don't worry, we will find you. Love you, Bonnie. X. Bonnie crumpled up the note and held it in her open palms. All of us watched on to her as she began to recite the spell, a natural Bennett. As usual, the paper set on fire and I saw how Edward's eyes widened and he continued to stare as if in a daze as the flames ate away at the note, but he never ran. He wasn't scared, which surprised me. Maybe if I had done the spell, it would have then scared him. Stefan and Damon were also on, looking with impressed stares. Elena will receive the note. It might help her calm down, I explained. Finally the burnt paper disappeared clear from Bonnie's hands and she stopped her Theban, snapping out of the stupor, which in return brought the glimmer back in her once deadpan eyes, and she blinked, looking around her surroundings. She settled on my eyes, so I silently asked her if she was okay and she nodded. Giving a small smile, I turned back to the book, continuing with the search for finding a spell to find Elena. Wait, find Elena? Fuck, I am an idiot. Why didn't I think of this before? We need to find Elena, I said out loud, and they all turned to me with expectant eyes. Stefan stopped his recently pacing to turn to me. Ignoring them, I closed the book and placed it to one side as the spell ran through my mind. It was easy to locate Klaus because he was a vampire similar to me. I've never really used the locator spell to find any other species than the supernatural, but then again Elena was a doppelganger. I realized I'd taken on Stefan's habit of pacing when nervous or mulling over things, and I also noted how everyone had placed their eyes on me. Damon chose to be the one to question my actions. What are you on, Issa? Pausing in my steps, I turned to them, almost grinning when catching their wary looks, probably worrying for my sanity. Like I said before, vampires could probably lose their mental health. I could make vampire history as a case study. Frantically waving my fingers in the air while snapping my fingers, I answered their unspoken questions. I need Elena's picture and a Virginia map. I held in the threatening laugh with the word Virginia when they all continued to stare at me. Now would be great. Stefan acted first, rushing off to find what I needed. Bonnie searched through her purse in a hurry, pulling out the small passport photo and handed it to me. Will this do? I looked down to find Elena and Bonnie in their high school cheerleading uniforms. Matt was next to Elena with his arm wrapping around her. All three teens were pulling faces at the camera. It was all so normal, so real that I couldn't help but smile at the authenticity of their friendship. Reminded me of, not now. Maybe I should consider therapy after all this. I scoffed at the thought and snapped out of my thoughts and falling down to my knees as I placed the photo on the floor. What's happening? Edward asked, kneeling next to me and glancing at the photo, then to me. Just as I was about to answer, I caught how Damon narrowed his eyes, then scooted closer towards us, but instead of kneeling, he leaned back onto the sofa, but with close proximity to me. I diverted my attention to Stefan walking through the doorway, holding up a map, while balancing 3 candles on the other hand. He dropped them to my feet and he too knelt next to Bonnie facing me, forming a complete circle around the items. Just as I reached to set up the candles, the door opened and we looked away from the setup and looked towards the opening door. Rushing inside were Malibu Barbie and little Gilbert. Barbie wasted no time in filling us in. We looked everywhere: the grill, the park, school, the mall, the bar, dealership, town, nothing. We checked into the house again, but she never came home. She rambled as she walked in. Maybe we can drive to Atlanta or Georg. She froze when catching us in the parlor, all of us surrounding the candles and photo. Is this some kind of seance? She questioned, taking off her jacket and setting it down on the sofa. Gilbert gave a half-hearted hello, but his eyes strayed to Bonnie and remained there. He then gave up being not so subtle and walked towards her, perching himself next to her. We watched in amusement as he nudged her side and she awkwardly looked away. Teenage hormones. Their attention focused on me and I realized with wide eyes. Did I say that out loud? Bonnie and Gilbert glared at me but I just shrugged them off. Join us I mean Caroline smiling sweetly at the blonde still hovering behind us. She took the invitation and set herself next to Stefan. Isn't he this cozy? Damon sneered but I still fought from looking at him or Edward. Who's this guy? Barbie asked. Turning to her, I gave my best smile to explain but Bonnie beat me to the punch. This is Isabel's old friend. I could see the taunting glint in her sparkling green eyes full of mischief. Barbie looked from Bonnie to me to Edward and then to me again before she too mirrored Bonnie's expression. Can we please hurry up? Stefan continued to worry, his fingers fidgeting as he pulled at his hair. Can you please stop being a douche? Copying his tone but I agreed and looked away from the rest and focusing on the candles, setting the 3 blocks of white wax around the photo which was now placed on the middle of the map. In with the Theban and out with distractions. Fixing my sight on the candles, I thought the spell over my mind and watched as the lights flickered rapidly before finally shutting down. Calling to nature, the wind responded and blew the windows open, a harsh wind blowing in and whirling around us. Are you doing that? Edward whispered nervously and to answer him, I lit up not only the candle but the fireplace. They stared impressively at my handiwork, which kinda helped my ego. After this, I quirked an eyebrow at Edward showing him I just responded. Turning back to the candles, I let the spell fall from my lips, Cravitona, Serena Marvicoltonia. Arbiento a vetru ama samacalanto. Cravitona, Serena Marvicoltonia. Arbiento a vetru. As I repeated the spell, I could feel Edward's burning gaze on me so I flickered my eyes shut and felt the smoldering energy of nature's force bringing the spell to life. I could feel the burn rising through my fingertips, burning my veins and pumping through me as it rose the thumping of my heart but something seemed to be blocking it. Snapping my eyes open, the howling wind stopped, the gray clouds peaked letting the sun shine again in the now lit up room. Looking down at the setting, I tried to figure out the problem and it was right under my nose. Looking up at Gilbert, I ignored Edward and Damon's calls as I took off my glasses. Hand Jeremy I ordered but he made no move to give it to me. Bonnie stared at me wide-eyed with fear. Do you want to find your sister or not? Getting aggravated as I felt the energy slowly burn out bringing me out of the zone I'd just entered. Jeremy gingerly brought out his arm towards me but my impatience got the best of me as I roughly grabbed his arm. Instead of torturing him, I took his finger to my mouth and piercing it a little with my teeth making him wince a little. Still ignoring the others, I hovered his bleeding finger over the photo and let 3 drops fall onto the picture. Okay, I whispered, my voice gaining the heavy huskiness again and I brought Elena's image into my mind. Cravitona, Serena Marvicoltonia. Arbiento a vetru ama samacalanto. Cravitona, Serena Marvicoltonia. Arbiento a vetru ama samacalanto. Cravitona, Serena Marvicoltonia. Arbiento a vetru ama samacalanto. Each word became more fervent as did the energy. The winds blew wilder again, stronger even, engulfing us in the encircling storm. I could bring the vigor from the awakened earth. Cravitona, Serena Marvicoltonia. Arbiento a vetru. The spell died away as I felt its release. Looking down at the map, I saw how the blood drops merged and began to move around the map. Arbientoa, ventru ama samacalanto. With that one last whisper, the blood drops settled on Reedsville and sank into the map. There, placing my finger on the city. She's there. Stefan shot up and I nodded, still feeling dazed, the spell not having been erased away yet. She's there. He frantically grabbed his keys. How can we narrow that down? He froze, realizing the wide mass of the Reedsville. I was slightly pissed off with his tone. Take it or leave it. He began to move around again, ready to leave, and we all stood with him. Try mapping it. Bird's eye view it. You can look at what's around there. Whoever's got Elena wouldn't take her to someplace busy. They'd go for a more discreet, hidden place, maybe abandoned, hoping to calm him down more. Stefan nodded along to my idea, casting glances at the exit before hastily adding, okay, I need to get going. He took his coat and made his way to the door but was stopped. Barbie offered. I'll come with, also grabbing her jacket from the sofa and following. Stefan considered and then nodded, still in an obvious rush. What about you, Damon? Aren't you going? He asked, facing his brother, and I finally broke away from the force to look at Damon, who met my eyes, staring intently at them before shaking his head at Stefan as if he found the answer in my eyes. I looked at him in this angle, his crystal ice blue eyes staring up at his brother, his jawline defined as he jutted out his chin slightly. No, I am gonna stay here, he answered before meeting my gaze again. I'll come too. Gilbert shot up, practically offering his death, so I rolled my eyes. Ready? No, Stefan sternly answered before I could. He gave a pout before continuing with his argument. Why not? Gilbert's. Because you are neither a witch, vampire or a werewolf. You're just a kid with a ring on, I stated, and he huffed, ready to argue, but I stopped. Go home and wait for your sister. I promise she'll make it home tonight. He still held his stance, but I knew the icebreaker. Bonnie can drive you, I added, and he turned all gooey-eyed with the mention of Bonnie. Sure, Bonnie answered, and they both readied themselves to leave. Don't worry, she'll be home soon, I promised her and Gilbert. Both of them nodded somberly, trying to believe me. Maybe I should. They offered to go with Stefan. I thought as I realized that I was now stuck in a room with Edward and Damon. Both were standing few feet from either side of me. No, not right now. My mind screamed for an escape, and I thought of a great excuse before either of them could say anything to make this even more uncomfortable than it already was. I need to make a phone call. Not waiting to hear what they had to say or any questions they had, I sprinted out the door. Whipping my phone out of my pocket, I dialed, strolling away from the boarding house and further into the woods as I patiently waited for his answer. Finally he answered. Well, I did not expect you to miss me too much. His tone was light, so I was happy that he was in good spirits. I couldn't handle him in PMS mood. Don't flatter yourself, Elijah, rolling my eyes. 7 though he couldn't see me. He sighed over the phone before teasing me. Your words wound me. Running my fingers through my hair, I plastered a false smile. Let me try again, I teased. Of course I missed you, darling. Let's leave the pretending to Catherine. She was way better with the mask than I was. Better, he stated, but I could still hear the smile in his voice. What is the real reason for you calling? No point dancing around it. Have you got a meeting today? Getting straight to the point. He hummed a little. Depends on what you're referring to. The doppelganger's gone missing, and I am 99.9% sure whoever has her will be bringing her to you. Only 99.9%. He continued to taunt me, and I gritted my teeth, so he obviously heard the sound over the phone. Shaking my head at him, I tried to control my anger. You know, patience isn't exactly one of my redeeming qualities. The words seethed through my snapped shut teeth, filled with venom no matter how much I tried. Guess I wasn't feeling like being tolerant. He laughed over the phone, well chuckled. After living with someone for over 100 years, you learn a couple things about them. His English accent was rich and clear in his words, with Iber pronunciation of the syllable. The frustration hit and I snapped. Are you meeting with any vampires or not? Whatever happened to giving your elders respect? Still avoiding my question, I could hear him shuffling about over the phone. Sighing in frustration, I raked my fingers through my hair again. Just 'cause you created me doesn't mean I agree with everything you do. Moment over. When he kept silent, I decided to add for good measurement. Her boyfriend and one of her best friends are making their way down to pick her up. Now listen, Isabel. Klaus was difficult to hunt down, so there is a chance of him turning up. Are you one of Elena's carers? Instead of answering, he brings up a whole new conversation which raises more questions. The smile in his voice was definitely gone now, so I guess I better do it his way. Yes. Why? Still questioning his motives. Then I'll let her go, he concluded. Always so difficult, so complicated in his one weird simple way. That didn't make any sense at all. Why? Not letting him go that easy. Surprisingly, he decided to elaborate. If I am certain you guys will be looking after her, then I trust you. You're keeping her away from Klaus. I figured him out, and the pregnant silence gave him away. I was about to call him out on it, but he actually responded. For now, did he have to be so discreet? But his answers always raised more questions. For now, what do you mean? What? Trying to make sense of what he was hinting at. You'll just use her as bait. Yuri welcomed. The smugness in his voice had returned again. Becoming frantic that he'd end after all this baggage, I called his name, Elijah. Elijah. By Isabel. My anger rose with him and several expletives raced through my mind as I thought of the different ways I could kill that man. Figure of speech. Don't you hang you too late. Fuck you, I shouted over the dead line before heading back into the house, my steps slower. Well, on the plus side, at least he wasn't going to take Elena right away. We'll cross the next bridge when it comes. I need a fucking drink right now. Trudging back down the driveway, I opened the door, heavy hands pulling at the handle. This day was getting shittier by the minute. I needed some kind of release, no, not sexually. First I'll drink, then I'll feed blood banks, and then maybe after I'll. What will I do? Go home, cry myself to sleep while listening to Adele and eating Ben and Jerry's. It was time I took a stand. I had to stop other people affecting me so much. Best thing I learned in life was life hurts less if you go through it by yourself. Maybe I'd overstayed my welcome in Mystic Falls. Closing the door behind me, I walked back into the parlor ready to give them the good news, but instead, was just in time to see how Damon pushed at Edward, causing him to crash onto the bookcase, the wood giving way as it cracked, causing the books to spill to the floor. With wide eyes, I saw Edward pick up a broken piece of the bookcase resembling a steak before I acted, placing myself in front of Damon with Edward frozen with the make-do steak risen mid-air. Stop, I chalked on the sob, threatening to tear its away from my throat. My palms were held out, my chest heaving as I gasped for breaths. Damon's body was pressed up firmly behind me, but I tried to ignore the sensations rippling through my body with his close proximity. Realization hit Edward along with the surprise to see me and quickly dropped the steak with a self-loathing expression replacing his burning rage. He stumbled back, gripping his bronze locks with a frustrated groan. Looking at both of them with disappointment, I tried to calm my erratic breathing before scolding them. Edward finally snapped up in attention, but avoided my stare as he glared at Damon. Both of them in a locked stare down, and I remained in between. Damon must have said something that angered Edward, who stood up again with balled-up fists, but I pushed him away. Stop. Just stop it, I seethed. My anger brought the natural reaction of the extending fangs, pulsing veins under my eyes, and the burning ache in my teeth. The tension was palpable as it buzzed around the room, engulfing us in the thickening air and intensifying the weight atmosphere. Silence spoke volumes as I stared at Damon, pleading with him using my eyes, but I could feel the anger simply burning through. He caught my stare and took a cautious step backwards in sign of defeat, so I dropped my hand from his chest and it fell limp by my side as I whispered, "Why are you acting like this?" My burning glare didn't faze Damon as he continued to send deathly glares at Edward. It was as if I wasn't here. I decided to appeal to Edward's kind nature because he didn't find it difficult to think as rationally as Damon did, but when turning towards Edward, I dropped my limp hand from his chest when I was finally met with what I had dreaded yet expected. Crippling fear struck deep in Edward's now darkened gaze as he stared wide-eyed at me, but then it got worse as he stumbled back, away from me. He was afraid of me. EPOV. My thoughts tried to adjust themselves into what I might simply witnessed. Certain I could deny it, but if vampires are real, why cannot witches exist? Seeing Isabel in that detail wherein she drew in her power, completely threw logic out the window. How she moved herself into some sort of trance turned into captivating, and I knew this new data might interest Carlyle, if he even were given the chance to peer her again. 'Cause why I doubt their reuniting is because of the whole thing I might witnessed between the black-haired vampire and Belle. I wasn't stupid sufficient to overlook how tightly they had held onto each other, and neither had I missed how they shared those non-public glances. It turned into apparent that Damon affected Isabel in a manner I did not, and even though I used to be in near view of her movements and her reaction to the Damon vampire, I had concluded that I might most effective go away if she dispatched me away. Looking across the room, I noticed how they all rushed to store the human, and I organized myself to comply with Isabel, but she stayed in her vicinity watching as her buddies rush away, leaving simplest the three of us. Isn't this captivating? I may want to hear his mental voice taunting me, looking to elicit a response. However, I gritted my teeth and clenched my fists to prevent myself from proving my jealous rage on his face. Instead, I fixated my interest on Isabel, wondering what her next flow become. She appeared to recognize the traumatic environment as she appeared from each people before attaining into her pocket as she informed us in haste. I want to make a telephone call. She ran off, ignoring our pleas for her to not depart us by myself. If I idea it was awkward earlier then. Sighing, I slumped go into reverse onto the couch and rested my elbows on my knees even as fending off. We each watched as Belle sauntered out of the room, and that I couldn't help however notice the seductive manner her hips swayed with each step. She turned to offer each me and Damon a cautious glance and offered a faltering smile before opening the door. She sighed, shaking her head at both folks before going outside. "So Edmund," he dragged out the word as he sat down. Holding returned the sneer. I saved my clenched fists by my facet, no longer looking to do whatever I'd remorse later. It's Edward, the angered growl accompanying my tone. Couldn't be helped. He honestly sneered at me, an amused glint in his eyes as his thoughts broke through again. What Issa sees in him. This time I snapped. I don't know what she sees in you both, I growled. The anger flared and that I ought to taste the venom that began to pool in my mouth. Snapping my enamel collectively, I attempted to pressure again the rage. Like it is crucial. I used to be added up to be polite and cordial to all, so I bit my tongue to prevent the insults raging out. As a substitute, I ignored him and returned to the couch and sunk down onto it as I waited for Belle's go back. However, he wasn't giving up. "How can you even display your face again after what you probably did?" I snapped up to examine him, growing from my seat with clenched fists. "You one of these hypocrite. As if you haven't harm her." I spat out the phrases in disgust. How dare he accuse me while he has finished the equal aspect himself? "You do not know what you speak me." Approximately, his dark glare uninteresting into my eyes as he clenched his jaw and copied my stance as he too balled up his fists. "I understand that I harm Isabel, and I might be doing the whole thing in my energy to atone of my errors if she permit me have the risk, but the fact that he become trying to make himself sound holier than thou made me unwell. We each knew he hurt her too. She deserves higher than the likes of you." Every word was packed with the venom that I failed at maintaining returned. "And you believe you studied that you perfect for that role?" He laughed on the thought, and my glare simply darkened as he persisted to taunt me. "I might be higher for her than you." His eyes became icy, however, then a mischievous glint played in his eyes, and earlier than I should query him, the recollections opened up, gambling into my thoughts. The pics of him and Isabel in every different include caught me off protect, and I watched in horror as he delivered memories of how he delivered her to ecstasy. I cringed and closed my eyes, fighting away the energy of the mind, but they saved breaking through. Not able to maintain lower back the anger anymore, I growled, "Prevent," but it rendered useless as he tortured me, so I charged at him, inflicting the both folks to crash into the wall. He scrambled to his featuring in a haste, as did I, and he grabbed me only to kick me inside the belly with such force that I landed at the bookcase. Him and my Isabel. I could not fight it anymore because the red stained my sight, clouding my reasoning, which become why I reached for a broken piece of the timber and charged closer to him, ready to end his existence by way of piercing the stake into his frozen heart. Raising the stake inside the air, but as I ran, a blur of a discern came in the front of him, and earlier than I ought to inform what turned into happening, I pushed into the wall once more. Belle's distraught voice broke via in an anguished sob, forestall, and I seemed up to satisfy her huge brown eyes full of worry and silent tears brimming in them. What became I doing? I regarded down at my palms, which have been gripping tightly at the weapon, and dropped the stake, equipped to beg for forgiveness. This became now not the manner to get Belle to choose me. She possibly hated me at this point. The thought broke my frustration, and I gripped at my hair, trying to tug the locks out of direction. "She should in no way choose you." His voice infiltrated through my raging mind, and I snapped as much as glare at him. He had the audacity to smirk at me. I persisted to glare at him, now not backing down but struggling with my bad reasoning, which was urging me to attack again. I became far away from him because the urge grew stronger, and sat go into reverse at the couch, trying to calm myself and think of the outcomes, like losing Isabel. That becomes something I would not ever chance. She become the whole thing to me, and I'd all the time combat for her, even if it intended putting up with. I've made like to her 345 times. That counts for something. I mean, you two have not even long passed beyond the kisses, have you, Sparkly? I informed her any vampire that glitters is gay, and you supposed he changed into brought up brief after I broke from the seat and moved towards him, the urge kill him becoming manner too much to rein in. I neared him, however, was delivered again with Isabel's desperation in her voce as she acted, "Prevent. Just stop it." She seethed and I glanced down at her best to discover a terrifying expression. Her eyes had grown bloodshot, veins framing under them, every so distinguished as if engraved to her face, but I could see them pulsing with the anger that had introduced them on. Now not most effective that however her mouth gaped open in a menacing growl, allowing me the view of the sharp described fangs bared at me. This turned into a side of her that I hadn't witnessed, hadn't been prepared for, and I couldn't assist but stumble lower back away from this a part of her. She stated something else but I didn't capture it because the photo stained itself into my mind. It changed into so sudden, so special from how she appeared. I hadn't anticipated any such giant expression to ever seem on her angelic beauty. She became round from Damon to meet my eyes, however the glare slipped as did the horrifying capabilities as she caught my expression. Wonder and realization in her nonetheless bloodshot eyes as she constant her gaze on me. With the silence introduced the anxiety, however I couldn't appear to discover my voice. What would I have stated anyway? She stored her eyes on me as though ready, however I stored quiet, no longer positive what to make of what I witnessed. A brand new buried layer that have been opened up for me. You afraid she said in barely a whisper. Is that what my features have been showing? Sure, I used to be surprised but afraid. You scared of me Her voice had taken on a new facet, anger perhaps. She moved far from me and Damon. Nicely, you desired to understand me. All of me before the ones had been simply words. Nicely now you they seen the fact, the alternative facet of me The anger rose with each sentence. Why hadn't my voice returned? I wanted to disagree, assure her that I wasn't scared, just amazed, but not anything came. Like I informed you earlier than Edward. I've killed and likely will kill again. I suggest if you double-crossed me, I wouldn't suppose twice when ripping your fucking head off. The component with the candles is handiest. A fragment of what I could do. Her darkish glare turned into burning holes into me, but still I could not form phrases to calm her nerves. She endured to examine me, the silence lengthening between us which driven us similarly aside. She then broke the gazer and glanced between me and him with a beaten and disillusioned look. Earlier than composing her expression into stone, however her eyes gave a clear view of the affliction she changed into keeping returned. Fuck you, Edward, she sneered. Whilst catching my eyes, then grabbing her jacket she stomped out, leaving the two of us by myself once more. However this time I didn't have the power to fight with him. BPOV. Go away the bottle this time, I slurred out to the lovely bartender who gave me a wondering appearance. However I hitched an eyebrow, bold him to venture me. Pushing the glass apart, I drank from the bottle but nearly choked when I heard my call being known as from in the back of me. Reluctantly I pulled my lips far away from the bottle and swiveled in my chair with the warm fuzzy feeling elating me. There stood Matt wearing a concerned expression as he held the tray full of grimy dishes. Hiya Matt. Matt, I sang, bouncing on the seat, feeling giddy from the hype of the alcohol-induced nerves. Thought it was you, he smirked, manifestly amused with the aid of me, but I used to be past worrying as I downed some greater of the Smirnoff. Whoa, slow down, he steadied my sway with one hand at the same time as balancing the tray. You may remorse it day after today, he warned, however turned into given away with the laughter in his tone. Searching him dead inside the eyes, my tone dropped the humor and have become stern as I promised. I will remorse it now if I don't drink. He regarded to get the message as he cleared his throat, and I smirked at him, hoping to present him a few ease. Drowning your sorrows, he wondered. Why do people waste their breath on asking questions they already know the answer to? Still I went along to amuse him. Tipping back the drink, I guzzled more of the burning taste, rolling my eyes at Matt's incredulous look. Please. This become nothing. Searching back as much as him, I subsequently responded his question with a lazy smirk, trying to. How's that running out for you? The judgment become clean in his blue eyes. Blue eyes Matt's have been a darker color, whereas damn his were a more piercing icy blue that appeared to be searching straight into your soul. With a sarcastic and very unladylike manner, I snorted before replying, pretty incredible up to now. This time, I drank the relaxation of the bottle and licked my lips, loving the bitter taste that numbed me so I wouldn't sense something. I looked around searching for every other drink and that I saw as the bartender became round to repair another drink, so I quick reached over to swipe the sherry, no longer as correct but nonetheless pretty sturdy. Earlier than bartender ought to see, I quick pivoted in my seat to stand Matt, however ignoring his presence as I greedily opened the cap to say my treasure. Thank you Mr. Supply for blessing us with this brilliant advent. Don't you think you've got had sufficient? He asked as soon as the rim of the bottle hit my lips. I paused, and whilst searching up at him, I caught the worry laced in his eyes. However, as opposed to guilt-tripping me, I most effective enraged me. Who turned into he but a mere mortal to inform me what to do? I used to be tired of that bullshit. Don't you have got a task to get to? I sneered lower back with a low growl rumbling in my chest. Matt's eyes grew into pebbles earlier than he stalked off, not giving me a second look. Nicely I don *T provide a fuck. As soon as he disappeared from my menacing glare, I turned around in my chair to down the sherry. It was barely sweeter than the vodka but appeared more potent. After my first 3 gulps, I bowed my head, respiration inside the sweet smell of oblivion. Darkness all started to threaten my thoughts, and I used to be gladly welcoming it, so I took more of the sherry, trying it to sooner or later send me into oblivion. To no longer simplest fuzz the thoughts but to erase them, so all I could reflect on, consideration on, became the warmth spreading to my featuring. Simply as I reached for the bottle again, a hand wrapped around mine, curling hands into mine so it too become wrapped around the bottle. I knew who *as fingers because the sparks shot up my very own hands with the innocent contact. Pushing that idea away, I wriggled away from the burn of the contact, interfering with the bliss I was in. Damon S.'s Salvatore sweetness, giggling at my very own virtually lame comic story as I lazily became to stand him but ended up falling off the chair into his palms. This best made me burst into a fit of needless giggles. You got here to get me, I teased, but my coronary heart warmed to the truth that he got here. Cullen had in all likelihood long past domestic already scared him off, and that called for any other drink. Yep, I did. He opened his mouth ready to mention something, however closed it again with a shake of his head. Let's move, he instructed, the creases developing on his forehead and his eyes hard as he mulled over something. Stroking his forehead, I smoothed out the creases, which made him smile and left a short kiss on my internal wrist earlier than dropping it. Something about the manner he allowed pass made me panic barely, but I tried to shake it off as paranoia. Copying his preceding motion, I too shook my head at his request, but the grin wouldn't budge from my lips, making it impossible for him to understand I am critical. I don't wanna leave. Me and Sherry have been simply getting commenced winking at him as I drank some extra, looking the darkness to creep up quickly. You've got had sufficient, he entreated and pulled on my arm, but once more I shook my head at him, but additionally shook the bottle in his face, and we each watched because the golden liquid sloshed around the early empty area. I didn't *T realize I *D drank a lot of it already. Damon pulled once more, losing me out of my daze. No, I playfully dragged out the refusal, as he pulled me far away from the bar. However, I acted quick and took the sherry bottle with me, tucking it into my palms. Time for bed, Isabel. There has been nothing fun about his tone, it was so indifferent, so icy and disturbing. I didn't like this, Damon. You figure rapid Don you teasing, but all he did was provide a short smile earlier than letting it drop, and that I furrowed my eyebrows, looking on the ground at my shuffling feet as I puzzled why turned into he performing like this. So bloodless, so distant. He got me in a locked body together with his arm round my waist, urging me on, and that I whimpered, leaving all that remedy in the back of nicely. At the least I had sherry. And with that idea, no, I cried out again whilst he took the drink far from me, dropped it in the bin as we made our way out. Him treating me like a toddler became insulting, and I pushed far away from his hold and stormed out of the bar, leaving him trailing at the back of after me. I was so indignant at him that I bumped into the individual ready there. Fucking Edward. In the uncomfortable silence, our awaited unanswered questions lingering in the surroundings, looking forward to one people to start. However, whilst he stored his silence, I decided to start. I notion you left became my detached sneer as I tried now not to sound drunk. However, thankfully and alas, I could already sense the excitement being erased. He truly furrowed his eyebrows before shaking his head. Rolling my eyes, I broke the anxiety. I noticed the way you checked out me. You had been scared hearing myself say what I'd seen. Added up the engraved memory of how he stumbled far away from me, seeking to break out, the dreaded appearance on his face as he gaped at me with worry clouding his eyes. Yes. I used to be. He confirmed, and I looked away. However, he stepped in the direction of me, so I looked up, seeing the warfare playing in his eyes. Due to the fact even though I heard you were saying which you have been dangerous, I in no way genuinely noticed what you meant, he answered, and I knew he changed into being sincere. I appreciated he wasn't sugar-coating his answer either. The reminiscence shifted and I imagined the fangs and the veins on my face and cringed realizing what I had gave the look of to him, and now you have got pointing out dumbly. He nodded once more and whispered easy, yeah. So why didn't you go away? Honestly, I was looking forward to him to say something along the lines of him leaving now, however he became too proud to no longer say goodbye. As an alternative, Edward cupped my face. Brown eyes assembly his golden orbs, as he gave his answer nonchalantly. I could never depart you, he stated it as though it became the maximum apparent issue. Edward, you don't know me that well, countered, returned, knowing there has been greater he hadn't visible. What if those moments came up and he got scared again? I could not preserve being cautious round him, in no way acting on impulse because I am afraid that Edward could understand me as a hazard. I am right here, aren't I? He smirked and I again it. Yes, sharing the same smirk. Yes, you are sighing deeply, a peaceful smile on my lips as I stared up at him. Then I speedy moved back from him, realizing that we were dangerously near, and when searching at the back of me, I noticed that Damon had caught that too. A wave of nausea hit me, mingled with the guilt, and I ought to sense the blackness of unconsciousness creeping in. Clutching my head from the dizziness, I swayed and frantic hands stuck me. His pressing voice sounded remote as did his blurry determine, and I felt any other set of fingers encase me earlier than falling into a deep slumber. XXXXX later on XXXXX. The dreamless slumber slowly diminished and that I started out to awaken from the sleep. As soon as I rubbed the sleep from my eyes, I rolled to the side, I looked at the bedside clock which studied 6:45 a.m. and I sighed, falling again onto the silk pillows. Wait, silk pillows, in which had been the flower-patterned bedspreads. All I could see was silk and that I grabbed at it instinctively, protecting myself, abruptly feeling uncovered, but as I regarded to my different facet, I discovered no person, no drunken mistake. Respiration out, a sigh of comfort. I ran my palm over my face before looking across the darkness, however I ought to see the antique of the room and realized wherein I used to be. Another sigh of relief realizing it changed into Damon's room. Ultimate nighttime-s happenings started to replay on my mind and I groaned, realizing I was now returned to reality where Damon and Edward had been. Taking into consideration overgoing return to sleep, I determined against it, may as nicely get it over and finished with. Reluctantly, swinging my legs over, I padded into Damon's rest room and switched at the mild as soon as my feet hit the cold marble. Looking at the replicate, I groaned at what I used to be met with. I seemed a fucking mess, my hair become a haystack. My eyes had been bloodshot and I used to be in remaining nighttime-s garments. Everything I had at Damon's, I had taken lower back to Mrs. Plant Life, so I had to move back there now, not that I truly wanted to paste around if the ones had been at every other's throat's weight. Might Edward still be right here? Have been they both downstairs? And with that concept, my suspicions had been showed as I heard a loud crash and wooden breaking observed via the ferocious growl. Fuck, forgetting about my dreadful appearance and rushing out of the room and sprinting down the stairs into the principal room. My eyes searched round, however determined nothing, so I ran to the eating room wherein I found precisely what I had suspected. Shards of glass and pieces of the broke wooden had been scattered where the eating desk used to stand. Damon had Edward pinned to the wall, his hat around his throat, however Edward became looking to pry off his palms. What the fuck are you doing? Each of them jumped at my loud outburst, both of them turning to examine me earlier than I saw how Damon become first to interrupt the gaze and permit Edward move, and Edward stumbled again. Like yesterday, the slice came about us as did the suffocating anxiety. Edward's eyes captured mine and he held my gaze, and that I read the desperate plea in them, but when looking at Damon, I discovered that he became staring out the window with a faraway look. It triggered the memory of. Damon avoided my eyes and commenced to go away, however I gripped his arm, turning him to me. What the fuck was that? My chest heaving as I appeared up to his bowed head. Ultimately he rose his head, to appearance eyes with me, and I stumbled from the darkish glare that he turned into giving me. His blue eyes had been so graven, so cold yet so worn out as he solid his glare onto me. "Why?" I silently requested, and his eye softened, however most effective, slightly, nearly as if he got the question I would been asking. Feeling confident, I reached over to touch his chest, however he prevented the gesture and it stung, the simple rejection reduced via me. My worst fears, my nightmares, had been manifesting into reality. He moved back, catching my fearful gaze, and shook his head with an irritated sigh. His raven hair turned into sticking out, so I knew he'd been pulling at it plenty. I waited for him to mention something or do something to expose me. He turned into still there, my Damon. Now I might deliver something for him to hug me or kiss me in order that I knew he still cared. However, the coldness of his expression had thrown me off, making me question if he even gave a damn anymore. He in the end regarded up. The glare changed into long gone, but replaced with an affliction twist of his functions. I really desired to reach up and clean out his frown traces. However, I was struck dumbfounded, not even sure if he would have allowed that. I hated this. I can try this. Isabel Damon sighed, slumping his shoulders, showing me he was giving in his very last defeat exposed. I knew this changed into coming. I used to be losing him. Correction, I had misplaced him, and it wasn't Elena or Catherine. It was me. I simply can't. He persisted. However, he didn't have to. I took a step backwards from him, no longer wanting to pay attention what I already knew. The air escaped my lungs, and I searched round for and go out earlier than he could doom us, with the final choice falling from his lips. He failed to allow me to get away as he took a step forwards, willpower in his eyes. I cannot sit right here and listen to him talk about how he loves you. I cannot sit down round, for God is aware of how long. Ready with a view to make a preference. He appeared to have trouble saying this, and that I knew it changed into something that have been plaguing me. I knew what he turned into getting at, however I couldn't prevent the stupid question. What are you saying? I need you to position me out of my misery, he murmured weakly, and I noticed the scared little soldier that were delivered into my care. Into my lifestyles. Damon forged a fleeting look, over my shoulder, at Edward before deeply exhaling. You have to pick out Isabel, me or him. Who else is asking? Forward to Vampire Diaries Season 4. 3 months to move. Alice, please let this tiresome triangle cease. Please. An excessive amount of already. However, good day. I like it though. Wish she chooses proper. Twary02, please be patient with me, we re so close to the end. I comprehend it's killing me too. About 2 or extra chapters left, thanks for the praise. Desire, I am nevertheless keeping you entertained, although. Thanks for studying and reviewing. We re so close to the massive bang. Steph A15, I am at a loss for words, this chapter became so desirable. I can accept as true with we re already at the part wherein Bella selections. Replace soon. Twary02, aw thanks so much, I attempt my pleasant to create the excellent. It does seem like it became most effective the previous day she broke into the Salvatore and stabbed Damon. Oh, they grow up so rapid. Thanks to your praise and for reviewing and studying too, for being through this bumpy adventure with me. Vampires 444 Damon. Select Damon Bella. Do it. I cannot look ahead to your subsequent chapter so that Edward can in the end go away. Bella and Damon to be together all the time. I additionally desired to mention that this turned into an incredible chapter with a superb cliffhanger. And I cannot wait for your subsequent one. Bye. Twary02, I used to be chanting this earlier than even made it right into a track. Damon. Do it. Makes me giggle. Ouch, no love for Edward. Alas, Edward isn't on foot away without a combat, so it is all up to Belle to determine who to spend her all the time with. Thanks for giving me love about the manner the story became written. Guest, can you please choose Damon? Twary02, bitchy factor to do, but my response to that is we re going to need to wait and see. Thanks for taking the time to reviewing, usually appreciate reviewer s enter. Mystery for all time, please say she chooses Damon. I really want Damon and Bella to be together. Twary02, like I said, all I am able to tell you is we have to wait and see. My head's reeling with who to select due to the fact I can be swayed with the aid of what you think. May also sound crazy, however whilst writing this I continually use the what might Isabel do. On that note, thanks for reviewing and analyzing, love to you. Amy 1233, like it. I would say it's miles a disgrace that you cannot replace more, but then the story could be over faster, so maybe now not any such terrible factor. Team Damon. X. Twary02, I know I try, certainly difficult to replace sooner, and all sorts of shit receives within the manner. I like to journey and before become in Kenya and now I am in Canada. Do not commonly deliver my laptop with me. Tale is coming to a close. It is sort of unhappy, however it is also an accomplishment for me. I used to be continually a reader, by no means a author, so this became form of a big deal for me to recognize you guys stored checking to peer if my tale become up to date. Love that, and I remorse that I could not stay as much as my updating requirements. Thank you for reviewing via this journey with me. Lilith Case 39 Girl Damon 2002 I understand how you feel, just saying his call as soon as is not sufficient. Damon sigh I love it. Anyway, thanks for reviewing. Love dispatched to you for analyzing. Mrs. R. Salvatore please say Damon lol plzzz quite pretty plzzz with yummy sexy vampires and cherries on pinnacle lol. 2002 I thought I was the Salvatore Mrs. This is one hell of a Sunday. Thank you for reviewing, respect which you re-analyzing and reviewing, letting me recognize what you observed. Oakgirl 8 this was sincerely excellent. I genuinely favored this bankruptcy. I do not like Edward, and I don't virtually feel for him. However, that would be because I by no means liked him to begin with, even in Twilight. I actually need Damon and Isabella collectively. I feel clearly awful for Damon. He's already been through this with Catherine, after which Elena. He does not want it from Bella. You do one of these high-quality tasks of writing every individual. You re-on of my preferred authors. 2002 thanks on your candy phrases. It's continually fanfucking-tastic that my readers by no means thought I'd say that. I will say it once more, my readers. Love it. Thanks for reading and for reviewing and no longer giving up on me. I have no idea what to call myself. Damon. She has to pick out Damon. It's non-negotiable. Update soon. 2002 love your call or no call. Love your comment. It's non-negotiable. Looking to preserve up with updating extra or less. Completed the closing 2 chapters. Thanks on your persistence for analyzing and reviewing. Cupcake Assassin 9 Damon. Please replace soon with Belle selecting Edward. 2002 thanks for being a regular reviewer. Loving enter. Thanks for reviewing and analyzing. It's been demanding, however a lot fun, long gone through so much strain with updating, but I do not remorse any of it. It's been so much fun to creating this concept right into a truth and having you all evaluate. Thank you so much. HP Pace Reader I am hoping Damon gets the solution he's searching out next bankruptcy. He merits some happiness as does Bella. 2002 examine on and discover MWA ha ha ha. Thanks for analyzing and reviewing. Always absorb account what you guys suppose conjures up me. Gemini 18 poor Damon. I know Damon had made his errors, however I like him better with Isabel. He's older at the same time as Edward is forever stuck as a teen. Can't watch for greater. 2002 patience younger grasshopper. I sense sorry for Damon too, he keeps going via this. Examine on to where your solution lays. Properly point Edward being stuck as a youngster, keep in thoughts Isabel is stuck as 18. Thanks for reading and reviewing. BTW I wanted to inform you that I MA Gemini 2 June 2nd. R Hatch 89 oh god, cast off Edward. No one desires to be with an everlasting 17-year-old who glaringly lacks maturity. 2002 lack s adulthood made me chuckle. Sturdy feeling in opposition to him Thanks for reading this far and showing guide through your opinions. Alicat Diva what a cliffhanger. I want Isabel to choose Damon. Please replace soon. 2002. Dragon Rain 618 I truly hope she alternatives Damon. Your number 1 fan. Wow. I like your story. I hope I can do something like that too. Can you remaking a number of drama after which make Edward give up on Bella, and can also you make the % come in? 2002 so honored to satisfy my no. 1 fan. Thanks for the affection. The reality that you stated you love my story approach plenty to me, thank you. I genuinely inspire you to jot down one it essay lot fun, and I used to be continually a reader, however by no means a author until now. Pass for it and PM me so I will read it, always open to new material. Sorry to say, however, the whole story is coming to an end, so I one T be capable of deliver in the %. Thank you. Besides it s been amusing, however then you definitely in no way understand would possibly make a sequel, and the page C might be part of it. You have given me loads to think about. And that is a desirable issue. Thanks for reviewing and making me smile. Thanks for studying too. Konyachibi is Isabel greater powerful than the Salvatore brothers and the Cold Ones? Whilst are you going to carry Isabel's beyond into the tale? Superb tale plot. 2002 initially welcome to the family, desire you re-loving the experience to date. Isabel is defo more potent as she is manner older as you ve probable examine on to locate. Thanks for you very flattering remark, thanks for reviewing and analyzing. KRA lover ah cherished it. Edward need to simply get the fuck out. UHG. Bella must realize in that second that Damon is the one. Oh, and Elijah is right here with Eddie long past he must take place in the love triangle. XX. Twary02 getting the bizarre vibe that you re now not liking Edward. Jokes. I've to mention I am liking the complete Elijah Isabel element this type of hottie, however unluckily I can t involve a brand new plot as I am coming to a near. Satisfied you re-loving IYT to this point although and that I am so thankful that you are nevertheless studying and reviewing. Amy 1233 hiya, enjoyed this chapter plenty extra than the last couple because they were just so Edward focused. Even though Isabel is a bit of a slut isn't always she haha. I assume Edward's response to her on the give up turned into because he changed into in the end seeing the actual extent of what she is. Thank you for updating so quickly. D. Twary02 so I am guessing you re a Damon lover too. Take into account that you ignored Damon, I ignored him too, but I just had some Edward things I notion I should cover if there had been any Edward enthusiasts. Turns out none of my reviewers certainly care for him. Thanks in your appreciation on my updating competencies in reality care worn out with maintaining and take a look at for you men. I LL hold trying bear with me. Isabel is a touch bit of a slut and a completely fortunate woman can also I upload even though she s not as bad as Catherine. Thanks ever so tons for reviewing and for analyzing, gratitude in your assist. Guessed why is Edward terrified of Izzy? Twary02 you have likely read on to find out but ILL solution besides he is scared because he failed to in reality comprehend who Isabel certainly became. He came and observed her much like she used to be sweet little Bella, however then subsequently seeing her with the fangs and the veins below her eyes made him absolutely open his eyes. Do not thoughts you asking questions virtually I love it. Visitor it changed into fine that the Cullens came to see Izzy. Will they hate her if she chooses Damon over Edward? Who does she pick? I think Izzy belongs with Damon but I additionally suppose that the Cullens should continue to be her own family if she does select Damon. Twary02 you by no means realize. However I think they may be greater disenchanted than irritated. They did depart her inside the first vicinity. Regarding who she pick we re going to must be patient. You were so sweet thinking about the Cullens into this. I agree they shouldn't shun her if she ends up selecting Damon. Thank you for giving my story a risk, however going through the hassle of reviewing absolutely pleased me, thanks. Visitor I suppose that Izzy must emerge as with Damon not Edward. Your story is first rate. Number 1. Twary02 no one has love for negative Edward we ought to wait and see. Love that you re-studying and reviewing plus I love the number 1 you gave me. Makes me experience like I received a gold big name. Vampires 444 I used to be honestly amazed about Elijah and that I did not surely read lots about him so I bet Elijah is okay for now. I form of like the jealous Damon and Edward so long as she ends up with Damon they can combat all they want, and I can trust that Edward turned into frightened of Bella, jerk. I assume that Bella need to be comforted by way of Damon for the following bankruptcy. Cannot await your subsequent chapter after this first-rate one. Bye. Twary02 it surely is awful of me too but I loved jealous Damon. Writing approximately him being all possessive and primal turned into a laugh for me hee I love your remark as long as she ends up with Damon they could combat all they need that got me giggling. Thank you for the top-notch evaluations on my chapter send like to you all. Lilith case 39 girl sorry didn't log in but that turned into extremely good and that Elijah factor I loved it replace quickly. Twary02 I loved the idea of Elijah being the writer. Simply, it become kind of an impulsive issue best determined these days. Thankful for the fact which you rereading and you loved it so much that it pressured you to evaluations pressured see what I did there YHIKNW it become lame. Shifting on from my nerdy joke thanks for the opinions and for even analyzing this far manner a lot to me seeing as it's my first fanfiction and I have even gotten past 100 opinions. Don 10 I like it a lot. I was surprised to know that Elijah was Isabel's author I think it is the right word. I like jealous Damon because I am a Damon Isabel fan. I really like how Edward were given fearful of Isabel. I think in the subsequent chapter Isabel gets disappointed with Edward for stepping returned and perhaps she'll display him her actual horrific side or get with Damon wishful wondering however I think definitely she might forgive Edward lol please replace soon. Twary02 writer maker identical factor at least I knew what you intended. I like jealous Damon too it was a laugh writing approximately that. I suppose Edward being scared is due to the fact he simply downplayed Isabel's warnings but now he noticed this facet of her. I truly considered Isabel taking place a crazed rampage simply to scare Edward away but then I realized if I was Edward the first Raleigh would not be within the location to start judging human beings seeing as he's a glittering vampire. I experience bad that I made you type a sad emoticon but I ought to be in the middle and now not be swayed through the evaluations. Thanks for the opinions and your love. Steph A15 I really like the length of this chapter and that I do not know what to anticipate due to the fact you always marvel me. Optimistically you update. Twary02 be attempting tough to make the chapters long however every now and then I determine to keep the fabric for the following chapter however I continually make certain it is with at the least 4,000 phrases. I am so stoked that you stated I wonder you because that was what I used to be hoping to do with my writing. Love sent out to you for the aid through evaluations. Fitchick hey love this story but really need Bella to get lower back with Damon. Twary02 probable a bitch to mention this but I am simply trying to place myself in Isabel's footwear once I started out writing fact be toiled. I failed to honestly plan on Edward displaying up critiques kinda swayed me now right here he's in his glittery self and I weigh the pressure of choosing as though I was Isabel. I must play Satan's suggest however also not supply whatever away although it's up to me. Live tuned. Thanks for analyzing and reviewing. Gemini 18 loved it. Can wait for more. Twary02 I can wait to write more presently working my hands to the bone deep crimson reference if you understand the track. Besides thanks a lot for the aid love your reviews. Thanks all a lot for making this so thrilling for me for being my inspiration. Additionally loving analyzing new material so if you write any new stories experience loose to invite me. Did ask in case you guys desired a Twilight fanfiction or in case you desired any other crossover looking at beyond opinions and PM's majority has come to the selection that I ought to do another crossover so I will be looking into that got a couple thoughts centering extra around the originals. Excited and apprehensive we will need to be patient. Allow _s examine on we could. BPOV. Silence. I kinda understood now what human beings intended by deafening silence as I felt it fill the room and envelop us on this type of bubble. I waited for something to be stated something to be done so it could cause a reaction from me but as the clock tauntingly ticked not anything have been stated, nobody had moved but I could nevertheless feel both units of eyes educated on me looking forward to me to be the only to mention something for me to be the only to do something. Instead of announcing anything, I counted the sluggish hand-moving count 8ing the seconds as they surpassed as the finalization of the moment dawned onto everyone. Onto me. This brought up Damon _s fierce call for. You have to pick out. Me or him. Me or him. Damon or Edward. Edward or Damon. My eyes had stopped looking at Damon S and were now inside the distance, trying to shape something to say however my mouth came up dry. I have been looking ahead to this moment however had waylaid it. I knew it wasn't fair on either of them why they endured with me, I could by no means understand. They may get everyone they wanted I mean Damon had already gotten Elena someone taken in a number of months and it changed into no puzzle that each girl in Forks had lusted after him. It killed me that I was being placed in the position as Catherine by means of making guys watch for me but it was now the time to give up all of it no extra distractions no extra excuses. I had Bell Edward referred to as from behind me and I angled my head in curiosity as to what he changed into going to say. His intense eyes burned into mine, pleading for an answer I knew he desired to induce me to decide like Damon had just completed however Edward wasn't like that. He become patient. Issa Damon also captured my attention and his eyes were fired with determination but his posture informed me he become tired. It had gotten too much for him. Damon wasn't Edward he wasn't affected person. He became impulsive he become wild and that I cherished that about him. Here I was caught in among selections onto what to do for the relaxation of my eternity or in cruder words who to do for the rest of my eternity. Funny how I could find something to make me smile in a time like this however rather than berating myself, I used to be thrilled I used to be getting returned to my vintage self. Choose one lose the alternative. Each person I cherished, I had lost and now I might be losing a person else. Ultimately I snapped into running mode as I shook my head. I do not know, what am I supposed to do? What do I say? The tumbling words were frantic as I tried to comprehend the concept of losing one among them. How may want I just pick out one and watch the alternative stroll out of my lifestyles? Say you'll be with me. Edward moved forwards, taking my hand into his. He kneeled before me, searching into my eyes, the silent plea in them laced with his ache from this never-ending warfare. I desired to break unfastened from his maintain, but my muscle groups would not respond to my thoughts. Belle, come again to Forks with me in my circle of relatives day after today and we can get lower back to how we had been. He rushed via and that I attempted to preserve up with him. Forks. The next day. So soon. What? My voice, slightly a whisper in try and wrap my head around the notion of me leaving Damon once more in so little time. Why become he telling me this now? I wanted to get indignant and shout at him, blame him for burdening me with all this proper now. However, I knew I used to be in no function to scold him. I really like you, Isabel, he breathed, the dedication so much like Damon's flared in his eyes as he stood up from the ground, simplest to cup my face and leaned in. Realizing his motives, I pulled away from his maintain in horror. No, I cannot. Damon certainly growled in reaction, and that I may want to believe him obvious at Edward. Looking up at Edward, I saw the harm in his face and I used to be about to apologize. However, Damon's grip became on my arm and he became me round to face him. His angered pressure became portrayed with the quick pace he used. I landed on his chest with a thud, but it failed to harm him. He in reality tipped my chin as much as look at his lustful gaze, which I feared turned into a signal that he would try what Edward had. Taking a step again from him became impossible as he stored his arm around me, however become now round my waist, protecting me near him. Our chests moved in opposition to every other and the spicy Italian, leather-based scent lingered together with his hinted cologne. Isabel, he breathed in as if he was taking me in. However, additionally I may want to experience the warm temperature radiating from his lips, making me dizzy from his near proximity. However, he gave me no desire of transferring away. You understand how I experience and you know I want you, he commenced. You know I would do something for you. I have seen you at your worst and that I usually stood through you much like you stayed for me. Now I recognize I've made many errors and I've hurt you, but I promise you that won't ever appear again, he vowed. The reality poured into his every word that he spoke with such fierceness. Mimicking Edward's actions, Damon's arms cupped my face as he brought me to his lips. However, as earlier than I panicked and wriggled out of his hold close. This time, I needed to put much more effort with the tight grasp he had on my waist. Ripping away from his palms, I did the first element that sprung into my mind and that become to escape the mounting stress that pressured me, suffocating me to no end. Pushing myself, I sped far away from the house, heading closer to Mrs. Flower's as I cut via the usage of the Woodland trail. I should experience sets of footsteps following me, which most effective entreated me to run quicker, and I pressured myself into quickening my speed and lengthening my lunges. Please go away, I screamed, my voice hoarse as it were, given lost inside the rush of the wind blowing my face as I dared myself to now not flip around, hoping that they would not trap as much as me, despite the fact that I knew I was stronger and quicker than each blended. In different instances, I might have reveled inside the breeze flowing through my hair, the manner my naked feet whispered throughout the earth underneath my feet. I might have loved the carefree peacefulness inside the ecosystem, wishful thinking, I bet. Isabel, each of them called simultaneously. However, I used to be beyond caring as I curved, hoping to divert them. My thoughts coerced through feasible methods, perhaps conceal in the timber or in a bush somewhere. God, I am any such fucking coward. Wait please, Damon called for me. His anguished phrases have been piercing me and I felt ashamed of my actions. Here I was running far from my issues, problems that I had prompted. It was all me, however I used to be too scared that I ran away. I did all this was my whole fault. That realization, my muscle groups stopped cooperating, pushed through my guilt, inflicting me to freeze in my tracks. Both Edward and Damon failed to assume for me to prevent, so they kept going, whizzing beyond me for a second longer before they each stopped and looked at me. How can I flip from my badass self into this, already losing my street cred? The absurdity of the notion quirked up my lips right into a small diffused smile. Discerning my use of alliteration made me burst out a mild chuckle. This is ridiculous, I breathed, feeling exhilarated from the run but from the small truth that delivered me joy. I then took in the that had wary expressions as they stared at me, and my happiness stooped. How might I make this decision? You gonna stop going for walks? Damon teased with a hitched brow. Allowing myself a small smirk, I then bit my backside lip, fidgeting with my hands, all at once finding them very exciting. Okay, no extra hiding. Finding the closing little bit of braveness, I squared my shoulders to take a look at both of them, hoping the cracks in my mask were not visible. Okay, that became a shit. Circulate. My lips gave a tug when seeing Edward's eyes widen slightly at my profanity. Guess he wasn't used to that. I bit my lip harder to forestall the effervescent laughter. Like I stated, it became out of order. You both just trailing off, no longer surely capable of installed words how I would felt. Anyway, permit us get to the elephant inside the R. Inside the woodland. They both gave a tired smile with my susceptible attempt to make them smile. I don't like awkward moments. Jokes seem to assist me handle things better. Edward stuffed his arms in his wallet even as Damon just endured to stare at me. Okay, here I am going. Hopefully I'll say the right thing this time. You guys are all about pressure and that I couldn't take it. It becomes so awkward. Speak me to each of them on this way. But I shouldn't have run, and I am sorry. I concluded before persevering with I am hoping you remember that this is not clean for me. Sighing deeply and trailing my eyes on the dampened leaves and twigs under us. I am really in no position to try this, but doing away with my sight from my shuffling toes, I finished kicking the dirt and seemed up at both of them. I want to reflect on consideration on this isn't always precisely choosing what restaurant to consume at or what topping to get on my pizza, though I continually choose mushrooms on whatever. I trailed off while realizing I used to be rambling. They each regarded amused with what I would classify as being madness. Besides, what I am trying to say is that this is massive. I mean, that is selecting who I want to spend eternity with. A joke popped in my head and that I gave a sly smirk as I finished off, and seeing as each of you aren't into threesomes. Smirking on the horror marked on their expressions earlier than awkwardly searching at every other. I had to giggle at that, which diverted their attention to me. Both have been smiling amusement in the silver glint in Damon's eyes while Edward held an admiration for me. You need more time. He failed to word it as a query because he already understood, to which I was grateful. However, I nevertheless nodded in affirmation. Edward took a step forwards but regained his distance, which I favored. Belle, my own family is leaving the following day. He jogged my memory and that I nodded once more, feeling like a bobblehead. I understand. I realized that the strain became walking me wild. This supposed I had a time restrict day after today. I'd either come to be in an aircraft returning to Forks or I might be getting into the Salvatore boarding house. I understand. I certainly do. In no it received backquote to be honest, so one can leave without them, so I'll have the solution before then. I was amazed with how assured I sounded, less complicated stated than performed. Why wasn't I panicking? Why became I so calm? He nodded in settlement, ache highlighted within the dark golden eyes. Our flight at 12. He knowledgeable me with a wary smile, and that I simply nodded, no longer sincerely positive what to reply to that. I noticed his arms twitch as though he desired to reach over to me, however then he clenched his fists. I love you, he whispered, a binding vow buried in his words. Again, I did not recognize what to mention, so I gave a weak faltering smile, pushed back the tears and grew to become round equipped to go away. I need to be alone proper now. My words broke on the stop, permitting them to see what it became doing to me. Even after going through them, I couldn't shake the cowardly feeling. With hesitance, each of them nodded and I took that as an okay to this ending. Bye, I whispered, not absolutely understanding who that became to. Just as I was about to walk away, I realized, what if this become a goodbye to one in every of them? This wasn't precisely the way to stop things. Which was why I spun around and wrapped my arms round Edward, his bloodless palms, first wrapped round my waist, pulling me near as he encased me, making me feel safe. I left a tender kiss onto his cheek earlier than pulling away and pulling Damon into my include. His palms were gripping to me tightly and that I melted into his chest. My arms trailed up to his neck and then to softly tug at his hair. I cherished how they loosely slipped through my palms. I did the identical and pressed my lips onto his cheek. The developing beard grazed my cheek as I pulled away. Now not searching back, I became and stumbled again to Mrs. Flower's location. This was so fucking tough. XXXXXXXXX at Mrs. Vegetation XXXXXXXX. As soon as I trudged into my room, I collapsed at the bed, pulled the pillow to smother my mouth earlier than permitting the muffled screams to sound inside the room. The short launch felt so correct. I repeated it again, looking to rid myself of part of the ache. Once I were given tired of the bizarre therapy, it hit me what I was doing and that I pulled away from the pillow with disgust at my weakness. This is what it came to. What next? Take a seat in the darkish, as I wailed, at the same time as being attentive to Adele, but take into account me wolfing down Ben and Jerry s like it was water. I was so sick of pity parties due to the fact this was not at all me. I didn't tea like being caught up in teenage drama hell. I they got eternity and that I wasting it, crying over a few guy or two men, unique men that I loved wholeheartedly. Fuck that s exactly what I intended. I used to be amusing. I miss going to Chicago and waking up in Rome every now and then in a lodge, sometimes half bare and if I was fortunate completely bare. I pass over the road journeys, the live shows, the amusing festivals, the hippie existence, the loose love. I pass over being myself. I desired no needed to get lower back to that, but who would accompany me on my thirst for lifestyle's adventures? Just choose select a person. It wasn't har. What am I saying? The 3 raps at the door caught my attention and I became to welcome Mrs. Vegetation, who slipped in with an awkward smile. She held a blue and green plastic cup and that I gave her, at a loss for words appearance when the delicious scent of blood. I heard you come in, she defined, after which held out the cup, and that I heard you scream. The wrinkles on her face extra described, displaying the sorrow she become feeling, and I concerned for her. As opposed to voicing my questions, I took it from her outstretched fingers, no longer having realized just how hungry I used to be. Bizarre, however, I will take it, smiling as I sipped as the nice and cozy liquid slid down my throat. I am surprised it is not bunny blood, guffawing half-heartedly at my very own funny story, and she or he joined in, but it sounded so forced. Had some stored away within the basement, she explained, and that I puzzled why she saved any. However, who become I to choose? She maneuvered herself subsequent to me on the mattress as I placed myself into a lotus position, my legs crossed below me. In a timid manner, she located her garden-gloved fingers on her long child blue skirt. How are you, sweetie? Worry defined in her eyes. So she was worried about me. Fuck, I couldn't take any extra guilt. Consuming extra of the blood to calm my erratic nerves, I spoke back nice. My one-worded answer became automated and that I stared down at the cup, looking as the crimson liquid rippled in a completely engaging manner as I avoided myself from meeting her eyes. From my peripheral, imaginative and prescient, I failed to pass over how she shook her head in refusal, as if she noticed right through me, before setting a heat hand over mine, presenting comfort for me which brought a sense of peace. It became the accept as true with that flowed between, which is the genuinely bliss. No, you are no longer, she murmured, sounding almost timid. It was so distinctive from her common glow as she completed her baking or become out inside the heat sunshine doing her gardening. I leaned into her, giving in to the truth. You are proper. I am not okay. I am a ways from okay, I finally admitted, now not most effective her, however, also to myself. I am a fucking mess. My calm demeanor inside the forest turned into crumbling away and the unshed tears brimming my eyes, threatening to spill. However, I pressured them away, now not looking to show any weak point. May is nicely informed someone, maybe Mrs. Vegetation, should assist me in identifying who to choose. They informed me to pick out. I am now not blaming him or something like that, and I realized that they delivered this on. I cried out in depression. They, she wondered, looking at me, so I stared up at her, realizing she did not certainly recognize my state of affairs irrespective of how strong the witch bond became. Shutting my eyes and playing the short silent darkness evading me, I opened my eyes to reply with a wistful sigh. Damon and Edward, the first replied. Just saying their names delivered a thumping pain into my chest, as their faces have been conjured as much as my thoughts by using the simple point out of them. The crinkles in the nook of her eyes tightened and she or he choked out the call with a pressure. A Salvatore the far-flung appearance in her eyes and her clenched jaw jogged my memory of what Damon had taken away from her. She tried to compose herself, but the sadness tainted the masks, so I simply nodded, feeling responsible. I cannot help it. I recognize he does stupid stuff, and even considering trusting him after Catherine appears not possible with the lengths he went to simply to save her, but I cannot help it sitting up on my knees as I stated this, however, nevertheless preserving my fingers in hers as I tried to justify my love for my Salvatore sweetness. With Damon, I neglect the whole thing. He makes me sense. I used to be getting starry-eyed just with the aid of speaking approximately him. The first time met him, I simply knew I could not permit him go. Our first communication within the ward replayed via my mind. There is so much more to him than the wall he places up. I have visible it all of it. It still shocks me that he trusts me more than his own brother, shaking my head with a scoff. He is special and that I simply can't discover myself to let him move, but I knew I could not pick out him based totally at the reality that I knew him first. I wished my reasons for the selection to be based totally on who I desired to awaken subsequent to inside the morning. Who I wanted to journey the arena with. Who I knew could defend me. And Damon, however, the excessive I used to be on dropped as I sank lower back into reality. Her arms squeezed mine, bringing me lower back to the room, but she entreated me on and I gave her arms a squeeze back. With a heavy sigh, I fell returned in my daze but became now solemn. Having him means I am allowing the fear to take me over. This become getting depressing, like my personal pity celebration. However, I wished to say this. It is either fear of dropping him or for him hurting me once more. The remaining component got here as a whisper. Allowing Damon back into my existence offers him this kind of extraordinary energy to harm me, I completed with a somber expression. Listening to myself admit my fears became. Mrs. Flowers angled herself, making the bed creak with the motion as she grew to become to have a look at me, and Edward. Why no longer choose him? Again she became biased, which turned into why I may want to hear the shielding tone she changed into the usage of while regarding Edward. With Edward, I am in peace and I am comfy. I always feel secure with him and his own family. Smiling when remembering how I'd been in concord with having Alice and Emmett lower back. They all made me sense like I was part of the family, like I belonged. Ever because I lost the entirety, my mum, my dad, my sisters and my brother, and even the unknown unborn toddler, I felt so lonely. Being within the supernatural, particularly being a witch, I might been screwed over so generally, in no way understanding who to trust, and I might help the incorrect human beings because they promised me protection and protection, but it turned into all lies until I met the Cullens. They had honestly time-honored me before knowing I am one too witch, and after. Mum had usually instructed me family accepts you via the best and the horrific, just like the Cullens had. Like Edward had, even seeing certainly one of my darkest moments. It's smooth with us as it just flows, I finalized with a shy smile. She contemplated over this, thinking over what I said earlier, then she criticized. Do you believe you studied that perhaps letting Edward go is so hard for you due to the fact that you're letting his circle of relatives move? Her eyebrow turned into hitched as she questioned me. Shaking my head, I realized what it must be sounded want to her. I understand how it can seem, but it's now not like that. I fell for Edward too. I took another sip of the blood. She took this as an impossibility to challenge me. Why do you like Edward then? She crossed her legs and I realized how this seemed to be like therapist to mad patient. Mrs. Flowers endured to be mild, never judging. What made you fall for him? He is Edward. He is this selfless, forgiving, affected person, loving character. While he thought I used to be human, it appeared like he would do whatever for me, and I don't think that it's changed now that he knows who I clearly am. Edward is so giving, he thinks of others before himself, I defined with a grin, likely sounding like I used to be bragging. Approximately my son. Mrs. Vegetation smiled, likely catching the wide grin displayed on my face as I boasted approximately Edward. Then what is the hassle with deciding on Edward? Even though she turned into a little biased within the scenario, I understood why she became asking this. Dropping the grin, I laid my head on her shoulder whilst replying, because every now and then, I don't like gambling secure. This made my mind flash lower back to Damon. He turned into almost contrary of Edward whilst he changed into being a jerk. However, whilst it turned into simply me and him, I may want to see his selflessness come through with the way he talked to me. His loving aspect when he held me, and even on the masquerade while he opened himself to me, something he not often did. Mrs. Flora took my fingers in hers once more and I turned to her, looking to hear what she changed into, about to say after the quiet moments of silence. I suppose you have located your answer. The entirety becomes sooner or later fitting into location. I desired to be glad, not continuously in tears or in pain. This entire helpless weepy damsel in misery, my lifestyles is over, act become all fucked up. I knew what I wanted. I had made my choice, and with that, I sat up and responded with a hoarse whisper. I assume I've a XXXXX subsequent day XXXXX. I hadn't slept because I might spent all of the night time and maximum of this morning packing, but also developing a hole on the ground with my pacing as I considered what I was doing and whether or not I had decided the proper issue. It felt like the right factor. Mrs. Vegetation had agreed it changed into the right aspect to some extent. She said, and I quote, "You do something you believe you studied is fine for you expensive. Worst recommendation, subsequent to follow your heart. It sucks whilst you ask what to do and in preference to humans providing you with a instantly up fucking solution they give you shit like that. Well, I am simply gonna go together with assuming she changed into agreeing with me. Or changed into she. Fuck ID is nicely power myself to the intellectual hospital. Put on white and stare at quite vegetation all day, ain't that the life? Shaking my head at my absurd thoughts, I shut the suitcase and slung my duffel on one shoulder and took the deal with for the suitcase as I walked out of the flower-patterned room, but I gave it a wishful glacé as I recalled the memories right here. The memories shifting back to when I first came here, to shoving Damon out the window, to Edward kissing me, and the recent one among being comforted through Mrs. Flora. I had made my choice. DPOV. I was going out of my mind. Why hadn't she called? In which was she? Become she boarding the aircraft? Was she on her manner? I had been waiting within the parlor for over 10 hours, however then whilst it hit 6, my madness hit and I saved checking the door, so I determined to fast track myself and have a bath. After a very good scrubbing, I rifled through my garments and located the ideal t-shirt. It became my concert t-shirt from our Rod Stewart days, which examined "Do you observed I am sexy?" Understanding that Isabel could get the shaggy dog story, I paired it off with dark denim jeans and the leather jacket I knew she loved. Speeding returned downstairs, I flung open the door, but she nonetheless hadn't grew to become up, so I closed the door and sat at the stair as I waited, seeing as it changed into most effective 7.42. Getting off the stairs, I commenced to pace the limited area at the same time as commencing and closing the door as I gripped my hair in frustration. If I wasn't pacing, I used to be checking out of doors, and if I wasn't checking outdoor, I was checking my look in the reflect, and if no longer that, I used to be ensuring that my cell phone changed into completely charged with exceptional reception. Giving up, I opened the door and sat there looking the driveway with intent. Elena's sluggish heartbeat stuffed the environment, being the handiest sound inside the silence. They stumbled in last night time, him sporting her snoozing form, and each of them have been nevertheless slumbering now. Elena had arrived with handiest moderate bruises, but aside from that she become excellent. They defined about Elijah being there and the way he killed one of the men. The girl rose, I don't forget her call, she became the partner left, after which he weirdly allowed them to free, but I knew Isabel had something to do with it. After all, I did don't forget he telling me about him being the only that saved her from the wolf chew. I cringed whilst remembering how close I might gotten to dropping her. I could never take care of dropping her. Where are you, Isabel? I whispered, my eyes nevertheless scanning the surrounding while using my touchy hearing for the purr of her Harley to emerge from the main avenue and for her to tug into the driveway. Her burgundy hair pushed again by means of the wind as she flashed me her grin and make a comic story about me being clingy. I'd then get up and kiss her, supply her the gifts, display her how lots she intended to me, how a good deal I cherished and cared for her, and then. However, none of that happened. Seconds grew to become to minutes. Minutes became to an hour, going beyond. I checked the time when you consider that it become now 9:32. I advised myself it was still too early and naively driven back the dreading feeling that became creeping up on me. It sucked that I failed to know what time Glitter Boy's flight changed into. Then I might recognize if Isabel became long past. However, I knew Isabel. She wasn't the type to simply up and leave and not say something to me. Love birds were now wakeful, I may want to listen their morning greetings. Stefan's joyful tone broke the non-violent silence, and I could not assist myself but pay attention, hoping this would pass the time. Right morning he welcomed her, sounding greater comfortable than before, may I add. I ought to hear how the sheets moved in opposition to every different before. I used to be assaulted with the sounds of my little brother making out on his girl. Sure, earlier than I would have been jealous, however no offense Elena doesn't preserve a candle to Isabel. Too couldn't find myself to feel whatever extra for her. Handiest pull I had to her was me hoping to recreate what I had wanted with Catherine. With Isabel, she kept me entertained simply by means of the faces she made, like inside the forest whilst she randomly laughed. I ached to realize what had been going through her mind. She turned into loopy wild and usually managed to steer me to enroll in her crazed adventures, just like the skydiving journey, and that I always ended up loving it due to the fact we did it collectively. I am so silly for by no means realizing this earlier, for never establishing my eyes to who I sincerely desired. Plus sex with Catherine may want to never examine to intercourse with Isabel. I have said it once and I'll say it once more, my lady became a wild cat in between the sheets. And it wasn't simply the sex, it is able to even be the simple touches or kisses. Having her near me changed into always a comfort. Her kisses made me feel wanted, and the hug within the forest, that fucking hug I in reality desire, it wasn't the last. I lost my song of notion as I heard Elena's care unfastened chortle before she answered to my brother. It is a good morning, she giggled again, and I simply rolled my eyes. I did sense jealous, but it wasn't of my brother's lady friend, however it become of what they had. I wanted to awaken each day with Isabel in my warms, to keep to shower her with my love and maintain being there with her. Simply me and her. Feeling nauseated with their new interest, I allowed them back into privateness and listened to the remote sounds of passing cars. Searching down, I gazed at the darkish pink velvet container near the color of Isabel's suitable locks. Flicking open the container for the 100th time these days, I checked if her present became nevertheless in area. I had gotten her a silver swan necklace with a sapphire in the center because her birthday become 3 weeks away, and I found that the sapphire was the September birthstone, alongside black roses, because despite the fact that they symbolize tragedy and loss of life and all that crap, Isabel cherished them. Though they had been sadly lovely. Plus she become my immortal princess. Simply as I used to be about to turn and pass returned into the residence, the vibrate of my telephone broke through all my thoughts, and that I omitted the two as I shoved my hand in my pocket. As soon as I pulled it out, her name changed into at the screen Isabel, her 90s image at the screen, and that I stroked it with my thumb as I looked at her brilliant brown eyes as I captured the first-class second Isabel throwing her head lower back in laughter as we joked round within the fountain. Her Ramon's tea was soaked as become her hair, however she failed to care. It vibrated once more, startling me from my daze, and Speedy spoke back, no longer losing a breath longer. Isabel. My voice turned into raspy, however it held excitement as I responded, shooting far from the porch and standing on the driveway. Became she walking past due of direction, she wouldn't inform me awful news over the telephone, could she? Damon, I examine into the calmness of the tone now, not positive whether it turned into a good or a terrible sign. She didn't sound scared or sad or happy, there wasn't any distinct emotion in her voice, but I nonetheless didn't give up the burning desire. With a gentle smile, genuinely glad with hearing her voice, my weight felt lighter than earlier, then my frustrations lessened and I luckily sighed. Good day, however couldn't assist feeling worried as I ran a cautious hand even though my hair. Hello, was it me, or became there a hint of a smile in her voice? The though converted my smile into a full-on grin. Hope soared in me and I gripped the phone tighter, not trying to miss a word. Strolling my hands via my hair once more, my knee started out to bop nervously. Are you strolling past due, or? I trailed off looking forward to an answer, but become met with silence other than the harsh consumption of breath which drove a dreaded feeling through me. Well, in which are you? I choked out, handiest realizing my tears after I felt them blur my vision. She too choked on a coronary heart-wrenching sob earlier than she rasped out, Damon. The whole thing I had to worry became in the suffering in her tone. I knew what I needed to realize. Collapsing at the driveway, gravel below my crumpled toes, digging into my legs, but I could not give it a 2D notion. Please simply tell me where you are. Tears helplessly fell as I clutched my chest waiting for her to. The sobs broke through and I heard her cries over the phone. The entirety I had was hoping for, I had dreamt of, for the each people commenced to distance itself along with her final declaration. I am at the airport. EPOV. Packing had been nerve-wracking, not just for me but also for my family. They all knew about the decision that Isabel had to make. Esme and Alice had seemed close to a breakdown of dry sobs knowing that they may be losing Belle. They all tried to assure me that she "d choose me," but truthfully I wasn't "t even sure, to be honest. I was scared. It was obvious that Isabel and Damon loved each other, I could see it so clearly, which was why I was afraid. It was probably a horrible thing to do by telling her about the flight back to Forks last minute, but I could feel her slipping away and I had to fight. Letting her go would be the most difficult thing I've ever had to do. Now we were all in the rented Land Rover, a chilling silence in the limited space. Not wanting to answer any questions or talk to any of them, I placed the earbuds and allowed the rock to silence out their sorrowful mental thoughts. It was even more depressing that they deliberately changed their seats so they weren't coupled, not wanting to pain me further. At the front, Carlisle and Rosalie sat, whereas Alice was next to Esme and Jasper. Me and Emmett sat at the back. They tried in engaging me in different talks, lame attempts in starting conversations about the weather while their thoughts surrounded losing Bella and what I must be going through. It even worsened when Rosalie's selfish thoughts were lined in the same manner. I ignored my family through the 15-minute drive, happy the dark-tinted windows blocked out the sun, even though we had decided to get an early start by leaving the house at 3 a.m. in order to avoid the sun. Once we were at the airport, I moved mechanically, refusing to think about what would be happening, but instead, robotically helped in taking out the 18 suitcases plus my duffel. Most of the luggage consisted of Alice and Rosalie's clothes and makeup, even though we only stayed for a week and most of the time remained locked inside the hotel, not wanting our glittery skin to attract attention. That was another thing. Damon would be able to go out in public in the sunlight with Isabel, whereas I couldn't. Pushing away the thought, I placed the duffel bag on my shoulder and took a suitcase in an almost robotic manner, still ignoring the false hope in my family's thoughts, but instead, continued inside the airport. Alice decided to flank my side. Giving her a small smile, I turned my head back to the front once she returned it. I took a little enjoyment in watching how her tiny physical mass was pushing the trolley piled with her bags. Belle would have laughed at this too. The thought brought another smile, which Alice caught, and she replied with a simple encouraging grin. "It's gonna be okay," her mental voice seeped through Metallica's screams. Alice's words weren't a surety because she hasn't been able to see Isabel's future, so we didn't know the outcome. Maybe Belle had some sort of shield up as she returned to her witch identity. Nodding at her encouragement, I switched off the music, clearly useless, and glanced around the deserted airport. We had 8 hours and 44 minutes till we check in and 9 hours before boarding. Enough time to drive myself crazy wondering if she would come or not. Great. 8 hours later, I'd taken on rereading the history of Beethoven in order to sidetrack myself from my impending thoughts. The familiar words helped as I recited each sentence 6 times, filling my mind with other thoughts before moving on to the next. "Guess we should head to security?" Carlisle asked, and I broke from flipping to the next page as I looked up at them. They were all mentally stressed, going around in circles with unnecessary worry for me. It was now crowded. People had slowly filed in, hour to hour, whether to open up the shops, to clean the airport, or simply getting ready to catch their flights. I am guessing that the large population of humans would be getting too much for Jasper, which was why Carlisle wanted to get a move on. Not commenting or scolding them, I shut the book and shrugged nonchalantly, not wanting them to see past the facade. "You guys should go on. I am gonna wait," answering with a strange calmness as I stood up. Esme moved closer to me, cupping my cheek. "You sure, honey?" "My poor son." Ignoring the passing thought, I cupped the hand cupping my cheek and pulled it down, not wanting her pity, which was another reason I avoided her eyes. Not wanting to sadden her, I still kept her hand in mine when answering. "I am sure. Okay, we'll see you later then." She gave a weary smile, the creases forming on her forehead as she said this. She pulled me into a tight hug before letting go quickly. I read her thought, finding that she felt the need to cry. Carlisle was next, but thankfully said nothing. Next was Alice, then Rosalie, then Jasper and Emmett, who gave comforting pats on my back. Esme hugged me again, this time not able to hold back her sob. "See you in a few minutes," I promised as I waved to them, even though we'd be on the same plane soon whether I had someone else with me or not. They walked on but kept glancing back at me with mournful expressions. Once they disappeared, I took my place back on the bench, but instead of returning to my book, I watched the doors, waiting for my angel to appear. Holding on to the small glimmer of hope, I watched intently at the sliding doors, ignoring the unimportant lustful gazes from the female population and, might I say, a few from the male population. I was so concentrated on each individual coming through the glass sliding doors that I almost jumped when a hand tapped at my shoulder. Not usually caught by surprise, I turned questioningly, only to be faced by a young woman, probably early 20s, holding an expression to which she assumed to be sexy. Oh my gosh, he's even more gorgeous up close. She even added a mental squeal. I caught her scantily clothing short denim skirt and a tube top with high heels. Next to her were neon pink suitcases that hurt my sensitive retinas. In her hand was her passport with the ticket slipped inside. You catching a plane not working the runway or working the pole not able to hold in the last mental comment. I took great care in not shouting at her for distracting me but instead gritted my teeth as I tried to be polite. May I help you? There was a coldness in my tone but she brushed it off. Fuck me. Her thoughts turned vulgar involving me in impossible fantasies. If only she knew how human food made me gag, that would probably dishearten the majority of her fantasies. Question is, can I help you? She hitched her eyebrow and deliberately licked her lips, trying to be enticing before biting her lip. The gesture was so different to when Belle did it. Fighting the urge to roll my eyes, I clenched my jaw and hissed through my teeth, no I don't think you can. Listen, I am sure you're a great girl but I've got a girlfriend, suddenly becoming very uncomfortable with her closeness. I leaned back trying to get away from her advances but she thought I was just playing hard to get. She began to trail her claws up my chest before licking her lips again and flinched away from her. What she doesn't know, one T hurt her. She winked at me. My patience was wearing thin and I pushed away, standing from the bench. No, my tone had turned stern, filled with anger. Still trying to be polite, I calmed my nerves, trying to not snap at her. She is everything I need and more. The words flowed with ease and I knew my thoughts were trailing back to Belle. Backquote and she s. Here I whispered audibly in surprise as I caught Belle s wine red locks blowing behind her as she walked through the airport, searching around for me. What caught my attention were the heavy bags she had brought. I grinned as realization hit me and raced towards her, capturing her in my arms, Belle whispering into her hair as I clung to her. It was real, she was here in my arms. She chose me and I found myself actually being the one to break out in a dry sob on her shoulder. Happiness spread through me as I felt her arms desperately cling onto me. When putting her down, I began my crazed rambling. Here I gasped out in surprise. My arms continued to wrap around her in desperate need. I am so glad you're here. I can't believe you. I wandered off, not wanting to mention that she chose me because it might make her sad thinking of leaving the Damon that she loved. Putting her back onto the ground, I remembered we only had a few minutes. Everyone's already gone ahead, so we better get going, seeing as they reboarding in 15 minutes. My words trailed off when I saw Isabel looking down, tears falling down her cheeks before she looked up to face me. Opening her mouth, she tried to form words but nothing came out, but I understood her silence. Everything I had wished for crumbled, crashing down to me as our fates became sealed. It isn't me, is it? My tone had lost its excitement and was now engulfed with the mournful goodbye that was waiting to come. I had lost in the battle and I had to let her go. Saying goodbye before had been so hard, but now letting her go into another man's arms would be complete torture. As much as I wanted to get angry and go after him, hurt him for ruining what me and Isabel had, I realized I had given up that opportunity as well. It's not you. Her voice was broken and torn, which permitted me to see that this was just as difficult for her. I knew she loved me, but she just loved him more. She shook her head and I wondered why she had brought her luggage. Was she running away with him? Was this a game to her? Come and taunt me? She caught me staring her luggage and shook her head again, the tears freely staining her cheeks. It's not him either, she answered, and I stared at her wide-eyed. She didn't choose either of us. What did that mean? This was all making me go insane. She sighed sorrowfully and wiped away at her tears as she gazed off in her daydream. I used to be different, and with all this drama I found myself to be changing. I wasn't me anymore, she answered, her voice wistful as if she was remembering the unknown past. She finally turned to me, her glistening eyes locking with mine. I am going to Rome. Then I am going to road trip to Spain. Maybe end up in Washington again someday. She gave a weakened smile. She pulled her fingers away from the suitcase but kept the duffel as she took my hand in hers and laced our fingers. I love you. I really do, but I can't pull away from who I am. When you came back, I found myself turning back to Bella Swan. I wanted to argue that I loved her even as Isabel, but she nodded and put a finger to my lips. I know you do, but I can't keep pretending to be someone that I am not. You have a family and you like your life at Forks. I like to travel. I like to drink a lot. I like to party, and I drink human blood. The finalization of her decision was clear in her eyes, as well as the plead for me to understand. I ran a tried hand through my wild mess of a hair before sighing while trying to push back the sobs that threatened to tear through me. Seeing the clear resolve, I cleared my throat, not wanting to add on to the clear anguish in her expression. Is there anything I can say to change your mind? My voice shy and timid. She shook her word, biting her lip, and I had a new battle rise. The need to feel her lips on mine awoke, but I forced myself to resist. Her chest fell and rose with the deep breath she took before answering. Well, I don't want you to miss your plane. The tears continued to fall as she continued, and I couldn't take it as I pulled her into my arms again, holding her close as I breathed in her strawberry scent. It was the last time I'd ever have that smell. Last time I'd ever hold her. Last time I'd ever see her. I love you. A new set of sobs broke through her and I could feel mine welling up. And I love you. My voice broke at the end, so I cleared my throat again, feeling her salty tears stain my shirt, but neither of us cared. I held on for a few seconds longer, knowing it was my last, before pulling back, not wanting to make this harder. And if you ever change your mind, the hope was apparent. She wiped at her tears with a nervous laughter as she replied weakly, I know where to find you. That glimmered my hope. Not wanting this to be the end for either of us, I quickly blurted out, don't lose touch. I reached down to grab my own duffel and took hold of my suitcase. I won't. She nodded, with an honest answer, and I nodded in acceptance. I really wished I could cry. Maybe then the heavy weight in my chest would be released through silent tears. Not able to help myself, I questioned her, have you already told? My words trailed off, knowing she knew what I meant. She shook her head and the pain increased in her eyes, her whole face fell, dread in her expression, worse than before, and I mentally berated myself for bringing it up. I can't face him. I just can't. Her voice was breaking again, the reply had grated at her throat. Fresh tears appeared to be on the brim again, and the realization hit me. If I wasn't the one to make her happy, then she deserved to be with who I could tell she really loved. With a resigned sigh, I shook my head, wanting to ignore the voice in my mind that told me to keep my mouth shut, but the gentleman side of me won. Bella, if it's harder for you to say goodbye to him than to me, it's clear who you love more, I answered, righting my duffel on my shoulder. Before leaving, I looked closely at her and saw the surprise flash in her eyes before a smile lifted at her lips. She lunged for another hug, and it caught me by surprise that I let go of the suitcase handle, which caused it to fall on the floor. You are too good to me, she murmured in my ear. My arm wrapped around her waist tightly, but I pulled away quicker this time, fighting off the feelings that rose with her in my arms. Hurt crossed her eyes, but before I could comfort her with an explanation, understanding clouded the hurt, and she nodded knowingly. He loves you, I repeated while reaching down to pick up my fallen suitcase from the floor, with the need to leave growing stronger. It wasn't exactly fun convincing the girl you love to go to the other guy, even if it was the right thing. But it needed to be done. Being her stubborn self, she shook her head, denying my words. You don't know how many times he hurt me. Her tone was clipped, but the hurt was evident in it. Yes, he did. He hurt you. You belong with me. I won't hurt you. My frozen heart continued to fight the lost battle, but I ignored the words with the memory of the final decision in her hardened eyes. She had decided. But you went back to him when I left, I challenged with a hitched eyebrow. To this she replied with a whispered, I did. She then began to twiddle with her fingers, biting her lip, and the contrast between her and the girl before was so clear. Belle made it so much more endearing, and I had to bite back the frustrated groan. Needing escape, I finalized, I'll miss you. She looked up in surprise before giving yet another weak smile. Let's not say goodbye, she asked, and I was more than happy with agreeing with that statement. Saying goodbye to her would make everything more real and make it sound more definite. I didn't want to say goodbye to her. Okay, I replied with a feeble chuckle, even the attempt in laughter sounded hoarse. I'll see you whenever. It didn't sound like I was pushing her, but it also didn't sound like a goodbye, so I was content with my parting words. Gripping the duffel bag strap, I steadied it, ready to leave her. This fleeting thought constricted my chest, and I had to push down the rising dry sobs. Her smile was a mask, her eyes gave away the sorrow she was feeling, but I didn't comment on it. See you whenever, she did however let out a nervous laugh. With one last smile and a nod, I began to walk off, but paused. Turning around, I knew she was still standing there, so it didn't take me by surprise. Don't feel guilty in loving someone else, hoping my words would spark something, but instead of nodding she looked away. The tears had returned, falling down her cheeks, but as much as I wanted to run back and hold her, be her comfort, I knew it would be worse for the both of us, so I just turned back around and continued to walk off. Goodbye, Isabel. BPOV. I had made my decision. I had bought my one-way ticket to Rome. I had packed my bags and called the St. Regis Grand, Rome. I had taken the taxi to the airport, but all through my planning, I had not considered how difficult saying goodbye would be. I delayed entering the airport to face Edward, but instead remained in the taxi, the driver under my spell once he became aggravated with me taking my time. After spending 2 whole hours in the small taxi cab going over my decision, I sized up my shoulder and took my bags from the trunk. Before leaving, I tipped the driver generously and broke him from the spell with a guilty wave goodbye. Once I reached the airport, I searched for him, but the tiny cowardly part of me wished he wouldn't be anywhere in sight. Turned out he saw me before I could catch sight of me. I talked myself into thinking it wouldn't be hard, but I had been so wrong. Seeing Edward's expression rise into immense happiness when catching sight of my bags, but then witnessing how his whole face fell sullen and the heartbreak screamed at me through his golden eyes, I sank deeper. I'd hurt him and it was destroying me now. I don't know what state I'd be in if it had been Damon. Now as I watched him trudge away, his head bowed as he dragged his suitcase towards security, ignoring the appreciative glances that the females around him. Most of them trying to gauge his attention, but he gave them none. It broke me seeing how torn up he was. I did that to him, I broke him, and I would continue living with that guilt. I deserved this. I had led both of them on, and this was my punishment. I'd take it, let it eat me away. Once he disappeared from my sight, I was left with the echoing of his words. He tried to get me into choosing Damon, the selfless being that he was. His words did click, and I knew that maybe my love for Damon was greater, but everything about Damon scared me. What if Elena left Stefan and came for him? Would he dump me and go for her? With Edward's words, brought new questions which lead to a whole new decision. Should I go on by myself? Or should I go back and give Damon another chance? Damon. The sudden thought of him created a mixture of emotions. I felt lighter, but I also felt heavier. My internal conflict was overridden with the thrive of seeing him again, hearing him say my name again. Maybe that would help me in deciding what I should do. Acting on the urgency of my emotions, I rapidly flipped out my phone and rang him. His name was on speed dial. The dialing tone rang for a while, and I worried that he may not be home. It continued to ring, and I wondered where he was. Just as I decided it was my sign and that I should go on with my original plan, he picked up. Isabel. His voice was husky over the phone, holding its allure, but I could also detect the urgency and a hint of excitement. In the background, I could hear his slow footsteps, his steps on the gravel, so I knew he was outside. Feeling exasperated that hearing his voice only drove me into a crazed frenzy, I slumped on the bench that Edward had once been sat at. Damon, I replied, trying to maintain my calmness. Saying his name materialized his face in my mind, and I was surprised with the wave of strong emotions urging me to run to him. Hey, this time, he lost his husky tone, instead replaced with a smile in his voice, happiness in the simple syllable. I, however, was far from happy or the calm I tried to mask. Instead, I nervously waited in guilt as I ran my fingers in my hair. It was weird how casual we were starting this. Simple as we used one words in beginning our conversation. Hi, I replied stupidly and found a small smile playing on my lips as I said this. He sighed over the phone a couple of times, and I imagined him running his fingers through the sleek raven tresses that I loved so much. Are you running late or? He caught me off guard, and the smile fell fast with his words. Of course he was waiting for me. He at least expected a goodbye from me, but I couldn't. I don't think I could ever say goodbye to him. Not able to reply to him, the silence grew and I could feel the tension building between us. Well, he began again, and I shook my head, looking down as new tears pooled in my eyes, hearing the stricken fear seep into his stuttering. Where are you? He choked out, and I broke then. The sobs tore through me, rumbling in my chest, but I couldn't catch them as they fell from my lips as well as the tears trailed down my cheeks. Damon, I gasped out in mid-sob. We needed to say goodbye. It was what was best for each other. He had finally found Catherine. Maybe this was the best for both of us. We kept hurting each other. I heard a loud crunch in the gravel before he gritted his teeth and begged for me. Please just tell me where you are. He pleaded, making me feel even worse. I clutched at my chest, wanting to stop the pain, but he made it worse when he gave an audible whisper of another plead. Trying to drive away the sobs, I forced myself to answer through heavy gasps. I am at the airport. I was a horrible being. I really fucking hated myself for this. I don't think he'd ever forgive me for this, and I don't think I'll ever forgive myself. I felt like shit, waiting for more of his pleads, for him to shout at me over the phone or for more cries. Silence prevailed instead, and it took me a minute before I realized he'd hung up. I guess he made the decision for me. DPOV. The once peaceful silence of my surroundings got me angered easily. Suddenly the clear blue skies seemed to mock me, and I felt the crazed need to rip someone. Looking down at the sudden crunch sound, I found the black roses mangled under my touch, and I growled. The simple action had brought a strange release. Twisting my fingers, I watched as the leaves tore and the petals fall from the stem. The crumpled flowers were then strewn on the gravel with disgust. In my other hand was the velvet box. My anger paused for a moment before I stroked the material with my thumb. Opening it once again, I looked at the necklace, the sapphire glinting in the sunlight. She'd never get to wear it. This new thought brought up the sadness, and I let my hands go limp, allowing the box to fall to the ground, causing the necklace to tip out onto the crumpled leaves and black petals. I spent a second longer allowing the rage to engulf me as I glared at the ground where her gifts lay before I rose from the ground, snarling under my breath with the need to destroy more. Damon, her voice. I whipped around, feeling animalistic as I stared at Elena's dark blue eyes, fear etched in her eyes as they grew wider, taking in my sight. With the anger, brought the hunger, and I felt it drive me as I stalked towards her. Just a taste. I licked my lips, ready to attack. My mind was telling me she deserved this. She had ruined my chances with Isabel. She did all this, it was all her fault, and she deserved this. I nodded along with the thoughts, agreeing with the voice in my head. My words alerted her and she stumbled back, but I was quicker as I flashed behind her. She opened her mouth to scream, but I beat her to it as I covered her mouth, muffling her ion mid-scream, and dropped my lips to near her neck, my fangs extended, aching for the blood pumping in her body. The pulsing veins on her neck were like a siren. Once my fangs pierced her jugular, I closed my lips around her, one hand around her waist, balancing her to rest on me and crushing any chances of her squirming out of my grasp, the other covering her mouth, and I enjoyed the hunt. She grew limp in my arms, but I didn't care. She deserved this. Her weakness made her droop, so I dropped the hand from her waist and used it to help hold her to me as I continued draining her. She deserved to die. Damon, she murmured my name, but I didn't care as the hunger or stronger, wanting more. Wanting all of it. Damon. This time it wasn't Elena's voice. My body was then whirled to the other side, crashing into a tree, the impact on my back causing me to groan, and I snapped up in surprise, looking at my brother, waiting for him to attack. I found myself wanting him to attack me. Instead, his attention was on the human girl who was limp in his arms, her face ashen, her neck flopping about as if her bones were broken. She looked dead. I killed her. I killed Elena. But she deserved it. Oh God, the realization of what I've done hit me, and I caught Stefan looked up at me, not in anger but in disappointment. He moved his attention back to Elena and began to pat her face. When that didn't work, her bit down on his arm and placed the wrist to Elena's lips. Please. Please drink. Please. Elena, please drink, he murmured under his breath, the fresh wound dripping blood into her mouth, but no move was made in Elena's part to drink it. She was still limp in his arms, and I gripped at my hair, falling to the ground, watching as my brother's tears fell, staining Elena's clothes. Gripping my chest, through my shirt, I cried out for hope. I didn't mean to do it, I was just so angry. Fisting the ground underneath me as I looked to the ground in a blurry vision due to the tears in my eyes, I wished for hope, something, anything. Stefan, her voice brought me back, and I snapped my eyes up to see her raising her head. Stefan and men cried out in surprise and happiness as she rose. Stefan cradled her, kissing her forehead, the gesture creating a twinge in my chest. I'd never have that always second choice. I stood up ready to apologize, but as I neared them, Elena's eyes caught mine, the previous fear corrupting her eyes once again, and she grasped at Stefan's shirt, cries leaving her lips as she hid into him, her frame still shaking. Go, Damon, Stefan ordered, blind fury in his expression, and I could tell if it wasn't for Elena he probably would have killed me. Not waiting to be told twice, I ran deeper into the forest, pushing trees out of my path in process. The sickening rumble as their roots tore from the earth sounded appealing to me, and I continued my mass destruction. Once I was far from their sight, I leaned onto the tree and gazed up at the sky, The blue skies were now shielded by gray clouds that closed in. Raindrops hit my face as I gazed up at the sky. Closing my eyes, I tried to push everything away and just feel the drops of water cool my face. But my attention was once again captured as the dulled ache prodded, reminding me to what I had lost and what I had just done. It grew fiercely, rising to my chest, pumping through my veins and infiltrating my thoughts. Her face emerged from the darkness behind my closed eyes, her cerise waves curtaining us as she stared down at me with wide brown eyes before she descended, meeting my waiting lips with her plump full pink ones. Just thinking of them two together, my grip on the tree had tightened, but I tried to control myself, not wanting to make another mistake, but luck was not on my side as images of the two tangled in a heated embrace raked through my mind that I pushed my fist into the wood, allowing the rage to direct my fist. That felt good. Dropping the remains of the bark that was crunched in my closed fists, I blurred over to another tree and threw the whole thing down with all the force I could master, allowing the anger to overwhelm my senses. It crashed onto the ground, branches breaking in the process and leaves tore from them, scattering to my feet as did the bark, but I was past caring. Like a wild animal, I searched for something else to destroy. Kicking another tree, I enjoyed having it topple over and indulged in the roaring noise it made as the wood cracked, causing the whole ground to shake. Feral thoughts were driving me to a madman, but I needed to exert my thoughts to focus on something else. Punching trees' bases, throwing, kicking till eventually the surrounding part of the forest was destroyed. Nothing around me had survived in my burning fury. I cosseted the moment of my lack of control and the relief it gave me, but realization of what I'd just done hit me and I landed on the floor with a thud, my shoulders slouched, kneeling on the ground, in the middle of the massacre, drenched from head to toe. This time, I allowed the anger to dissipate and permitted the tears to flow freely. My fingers found themselves on my chest, pulling at the stupid shirt in silent cries for the pain to stop. I just wanted it to stop. I'd lost the battle without being given a chance. Isabel was not mine, she didn't want to be. She had already made her choice. Why had I been so blind? I had lost what was undeniably the best thing that had ever happened to me. I was brought out of my thoughts when arms encased me and sobs that didn't belong to me followed. I turned to make sure it wasn't a dream. Here she was, tears trailing down her face with a heart-wrenching expression, but instead of comforting her, I wrapped my arms around her, clinging to her for dear life, needing her to just be here. I thought you left, sobbing onto her helplessly as I clung to her form in desperation. She didn't push me away, instead she continued to grip me, returning the fierceness of my hug. All was lost because all I could think of was that she was here. I couldn't, she rasped out. Don't leave me, I cried into her shoulder, pleading for her to understand that I couldn't ever leave her. She needed to understand just how much I needed her. Never, she breathed and clung to me, almost matching my desperation. My Isabel. The end. Thanks for watching.